After a successful decade run as a feature documentary, Eyes of the Mothman is now a podcast containing bonus information and, for the first time ever, the complete, unedited field interview tapes with eyewitnesses, experts, and those who were directly impacted by the Mothman incidents that occurred in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 1966 and 1967. Although this podcast is meant to act as a historical record and an archive of the events that transpired, all material contained here is not for reproduction without the written consent by the copyright holder, Redline Studios, Incorporated. Welcome to the Eyes of the Mothman podcast. I'm the writer-director, Matthew Pellowski. I'm here with the director of photography, Neil Stevens.
Hello.
And I'm with Anastasia Konstantinou, the producer of the film.
Hi.
All right, it's been a while. It's good to see you both. And first thing that comes to mind when you hear Eyes of the Mothman or Mothman, what's the first thoughts you guys have?
Well, before I started on the movie, it was just the reference to the Richard Gere movie. And that was the only idea of that I ever heard of. But now when I hear about it, I have all these images in my mind, the images of that people have drawn from witnesses and cartoonists. I've seen, it's the bridge, it's the town, it's being on the Ohio River. It's all of those things. That's what I think about. It's just a flood of those kind of wild images.
Yeah, it's now part of our life, whether we wanted it to be or not. What about with the film? When you think of the making of our film and being out there, what are some of the things that come to mind?
Well, it was my first experience being in West Virginia.
Same with me. What about you?
Yeah, I had never been to West Virginia before.
Yeah, it was your first time out there for all of us in West Virginia. What were your preconceived notions going in, and then what was it actually like? Anything different?
Yeah, I mean the drive down there, it's a bit enchanting kind of thing. You see all these suddenly in all these hills, and we were driving through fog, and it was really these glass highways with no traffic. And when you're coming from New York, it's just like, oh my God, this is like heaven.
Yeah, almost heaven.
Almost heaven.
You're heading into Appalachia,
right? And it wasn't. It's something that you fly over. It's not something that you drive through. And now suddenly we're there, and you start to absorb all the accents and all the waterways that all lead to the Ohio River, and why these different towns popped up because of different industries at different times. So it was really beautiful, kind of a lot of untouched land and something that I'm just not used to.
Yeah, it was a fascinating place. Anastasia, what do you think of when you first hear the word Mothman or Eyes of the Mothman, thinking back to our film and being out there together?
The first thing that comes to mind is Harris's Steakhouse. For some reason, when I think of Mothman, I think of that restaurant. Just the people, everyone was super nice. It was very different from what I grew up in. I grew up in the city in Brooklyn. That was kind of my first experience outside of the city, I think. I just really had a good experience in West Virginia and Point Pleasant. It was just a really fun time.
Yeah, I have a lot of good memories. Really nothing but positive things when I think back to making the film together. It was really my first attempt at making a documentary. I really had no idea what I was doing. You had done a few films, I think, before then, right?
Yeah, I'm the old man, so yeah, I've done.
You were the old man on the crew,
and on a skeleton crew.
You didn't. You hadn't made anything outside of film school, right? Documentary wise,
No.
This was our first project. I'm trying to remember how it all came about. I mean, I know that I had always been a big fan of the paranormal, and I loved UFOs and all of those stories. Like, this is now going back to like the early 2000s, where it's mainstream now. But at the time, I mean, even the internet was not like so intertwined with like pop culture and our everyday use. Like, I remember going to my college library to check my email early on. And one of the things that I used to do on the early internet was to look up all of these stories of UFOs and sightings and stuff. I just thought it was really fascinating. I think anything you can't explain is always interesting because you don't know what it is. Mothman, aliens, these things, there's a mystery to it. And, this day and age, there's not a whole lot of mysteries left out there. So I've always kind of been interested in the paranormal. And I remember even though I was kind of like on the side, really kind of intrigued by these things, I was supposed to go see another film at the movie theater in Union Square. Remember that movie theater that used to be there? It was such a good movie theater.
On the south side?
Yeah, it was a great movie theater. It had great sound. I can't remember what I was supposed to see. I was supposed to see something, and then it got sold out. So then I ended up going in and just saw this movie called The Mothman Prophecies, the Richard Gere movie that you mentioned. And I knew nothing about it. So I kind of went in with no preconceived notions. I just wanted to see a film. And I really enjoyed the film. I was surprised to see that it was based on a true story. And, through my own just kind of side interests in the paranormal, I was shocked that I had never heard about this. And to me, it made me want to read the book. And then I read the book. And then after reading the book, I just was surprised that no one had ever made a documentary about the subject matter, because it had everything in it to me. I mean, usually you have like a Bigfoot story, a Loch Ness Monster story. There's a monster, or there's just a UFO, or there's an abduction. This had really everything. It had a creature. It had a disaster where real people were affected. Real people died with the Silver Bridge. It had an Indian curse. It had Men in Black. It had the stuff in Parkersburg with Woodrow Derenberger. And there was just everything under the sun paranormal with this story. And I just was shocked nobody had created a documentary. I thought the material lent itself better for a documentary than a narrative film. Even though I really enjoyed the narrative film, I just thought so much could be done with this in a documentary. And that's kind of where the idea started, I think, right? Did you go to the movies? Did you see the movie with me?
I was with you, yeah. I don't remember, honestly, I don't remember the movie that well. I just remember seeing it with you. And then I think because of the movie, I think you ended up getting the book because you were interested in it. Is that what happened?
I read the book, and I thought the book was really well done too. And I just thought there was so much material there. And in fairness to the narrative film, like when you make a narrative film, like we've all made narrative films here and we've made documentaries. And there are two different animals. When you make a narrative film, it's entertainment first. You have to change things and adjust things. You have to move a little bit away from the authenticity of a story for the sake of entertainment. Not everyone's going to walk into that film wanting, a scrupulous, fact-driven project, fact-driven film. So I thought the film was good. I thought it was executed well. I really liked the way that it wasn't like your typical monster movie. It was very psychological. It was more about what you didn't see than what you did see in the narrative film. But still, just after reading the book and going like, oh my God, there's so much information here. There's so much material to work with. I was just surprised no one had ever really made a documentary on it. And I think at the time there was nothing. There was no other films. Now, it's how many years later? 10, 20 years later. There's lots of material out there, but at the time there was really nothing.
18 years later.
Well, I was close, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, that's why when I heard after I had seen the movie, I'm like, oh yeah, it's a good kind of thriller horror movie type of thing. And then I hear, oh no, that really happened. That bridge really fell, and this. I'm like, whoa, what? There's some sort of background to this story. There's some sort of real thing. It's almost like it feels like the Amityville horror type of idea where you're like, oh no, this happened. You hear all these other things like Jaws or something, some great horror movie, but you never find out like, no, that really went on.
Right. I think at the end of the Mark Pellington, Richard Gere movie, when it said based on real events, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, how is this possible? And more so, how have I not heard about it? Right. Because even at the time, like I said, it wasn't as mainstream with these things, but everybody at that time had heard about Rick Roswell, New Mexico. That was like the most popular thing. Everybody knew about Roswell. And that was like such the cliche thing to know about. And to me, this story had so much more to it. And I just could not believe I had never heard anything about it. I've always been a fan of sci-fi films. And I've always, like I said, loved the paranormal as a subject matter. Both of you, what was your kind of background before going in to make the movie together? Were you believers of these things, skeptics of these things? Like where did you kind of land with your interests in that subject matter?
I mean, I really like horror movies. Not a fan of like science fiction and stuff like that, but I love horror movies. I believe in some things, don't believe in others. I don't know. I was kind of like on the fence. I believe in aliens and like life on other planets, and I believe in ghosts. But but I don't believe in everything. So this was kind of like one of those things where I heard about it and we saw the movie and it was like, oh, it's based on real events. And I was kind of like, really, how real are these events? But then, when we went out there, I started thinking, oh, maybe I do believe in all this stuff.
But it's fun too, right? There's something fun about going out and making a movie about something like this. 'Cause whether you believe or not, it's just fun. It's a fun topic. What about you, Neil? I know you're a skeptical person.
Yes, I am. But my background, I mean, not watching movies, but making them, working on documentaries. I've worked on movies about terror attacks. I've interviewed pilots from World War II. I've usually a lot more realistic based stuff, crime stuff, real murder kind of documentaries. Those are things that are all steeped in things that are all too real. So I thought when I was going to do this, I'm like, okay, here's a departure for me. But the first inkling that I had that this was not a kind of a frivolous investigation was when we went to Ohio State. That was my first real feeling. Was it Ohio State in Columbus?
Yeah, Ohio State University.
Yeah, and we were talking to
that was, I think, our first interview.
First interview. And we sat there on the campus and we interviewed a very esteemed professor. And it's interesting what you took of all these legends and say, okay, let's look at them. Let's parse them out. Let's ask a very simple question. Okay, they said that somebody could be taken away by this Mothman bird-like creature. Okay, let's talk to an anthropologist who can answer the question, have human beings ever been prey to birds? And not only did he agree with that assessment, but he actually had skulls of ancient humans that had bird claw marks on them. So he had evidence in his hand that he showed us. And it was like, this is not a frivolous kind of, scary Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot thing. This is, okay, let's dive deep into all of these questions and see if we can get legitimate answers from, people who have valid opinions. And that was like, okay, this is going to be different. This is an investigative kind of experience. This is not just some kind of frivolous thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That was definitely my goal with the film, was to have it be very journalistic. And knowing, again, being a fan of all these subjects, I think where a lot of them go wrong in how they're presented is that they're very sensationalized, and it's always some, stereotypical cliche hillbilly guy who saw something, and it's not very detailed, and it's vague, and it just sounds not believable many times. And so with the subject matter that we were dealing with, I knew that there was kind of two parts. There was very much like a lot of traditional history with this town. The first battle of the American Revolution took place there. For me, one of the most interesting things was the Chief Cornstalk curse. And we'll get into that later. We're going to get into a lot of things. But you're absolutely right. I definitely wanted to take a journalistic approach. Journalism, which is barely in existence anymore now, but just the idea that you're not going to really have an opinion on the topic you're exploring as a filmmaker or a reporter, but you're going to present all sides. The paranormal side, and for me, it wasn't about what is Mothman. It was more like, where did it come from? Because I think there's no denying that something happened. Too many people saw this thing. Too many encounters were up close. I don't believe this was like a mass hallucination. I think people saw something. So to me, it was more, where could this have come from that people were seeing, and not really out to solve what is it. And so I absolutely wanted to take every plausible route of a possible origin and explanation, whether it was something rooted in true history or culture or folklore or Native American culture, or if it was government related, if it was a toxic waste spill, which you had that possibility to, something more plausible or something more grounded, or if it was something truly science fiction or something out of this world. I definitely wanted to cover every base. And my goal was to have this be like an end all be all definitive exploration into the subject matter. I really wasn't out to make an entertaining film, kind of like the narrative film. I thought, well, that was done really well. There's no need to do that. And not that documentaries can't be entertaining, but my goal was to really have this be almost like an authority and a timeless exploration of the subject matter. And I actually think that we were all successful in doing that. I mean, it's been a long time now since we made it, and it's still, I still get emails. I still get people reaching out about the film. It's still on every major streaming device. And I think, we kind of did what we set out to do. I'll bring it back to also going back to like the material. Again, looking at the subject matter, I thought it was fascinating. And again, at the time, all there was the Richard Gere film. I looked on the internet to find as much as I could find about the topic because I was so intrigued by it. And the only other thing that was out there was the John Keel book, which resonated with me because, I was living in New York at the time. John Keel was a journalist himself from New York and a writer. And so I had a kind of personal connection there with, similar career and similar interests, I guess, in something like this. And then the only other thing that I found out there was a book that was kind of a archival coffee table type book where it was really, it was newspaper clippings from the town. And that was by Jeff Walmsley, who lived in Point Pleasant. It was a local person. And I bought his book on Amazon. I read it. I went through it. It was a very simple but direct and effective book. And I think the next thing I did was try to reach out to him. And I think we made communication with him and told him, I think that we were, possibly interested in doing a documentary. Asked him, has anyone ever done this before out there? We didn't know how it would be received. And he was incredibly nice and kind. And we spoke back and forth. And I think what happened after that is he invited us to come out to what would have been one of the first and early stages of the Mothman Festival. I think it was its third year.
I think it was the second year.
Second year?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And so now Mothman, the Mothman Festival has grown to this like really sizable event when you look at it now. I think we have an interesting perspective because we really saw it in its infancy and what it's grown to be. If you go out there now, it's a big thing. And I'm happy for them that it's become this. But, early on, it was small and you could see the thought behind it and the workings of it. But, we went out there to kind of network and just meet some people. I remember, Anastasia, you and I went out there first. I remember we stayed in Hurricane, West Virginia. We stayed on the outskirts because we didn't know what we were getting into and we didn't want to stay in town because like if something went bad, we're like, we need separation. And I remember my first memories of that trip are I remember it being very dark to drive at night, like just no streetlights, and driving around some of the mountains to get there and the back roads. And I just remember thinking, anything can be out there in this landscape because it was all foreign to us. We're from the East Coast, Northeast New York City area. I kind of grew up on a farm as a kid, so I wasn't, I didn't grow up on a farm. My grandparents had a farm, but I spent a lot of time there. But I wasn't turned off or, it wasn't weird to me to be in the outdoors, but it was a very different landscape than anything I was used to. Let's talk a little bit about the festival act then. Neil, you didn't go to I don't think you didn't make that trip with us at first.
When you went back to the festival?
So yeah, to the festival,
No.
first year.
No.
And I remember we went out there, we met Jeff, we met Denny, we met Susan, and we met Chad.
And Carolyn.
Yeah, Carolyn, going back to, your memory being Carolyn's Steakhouse, I mean, that was a fixture. We're going to get into all these things in more detail, but like, that was on Main Street, in Point Pleasant, if you've never been there, it is literally it is a small town. I mean that in the best sense possible that, if you need your post office, your place to get groceries, your place to go get a burger, everything's on that little main street. And I love that about it. Like there's your movie theater, everything's kind of right there in a very nostalgic, kind of old school, traditional American way. When you think of Americana and you think of the small town America, everything is was right there. And it's kind of still in place. Obviously, Point Pleasant has grown around it, around that area and kind of expanded, but you can see like where that main town and main street, literally Main Street, once was right off the river there.
Yeah, and if you turn the clock back 100 years, it would look exactly the same, besides the fact that the Silver Bridge is not there anymore, but all of the buildings and the structures, it's like, when you look at New York, year to year to year, it's a different landscape, it's a different skyline. you can't believe the things that they tore down. It doesn't look like they tore down anything down there. It built it, established it, and that was the end. And it's really, if you look at pictures from 1920, I don't think it's going to be much of a difference.
Let's talk about the town for a minute. Let's talk about that. So it is a small town. Everyone knows everyone. I do remember that when we were in town, everybody knew. Everybody knew we were in town. Everybody knew who we were, where we were going, what we were doing. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's just you stick out. You stick out like a sore thumb. I also try to think of my early memories of the town. Just being from New York, where when you live in New York City, you avoid contact with strangers. People come up to you and it means they want something. They want money, or it's a possible dangerous situation. You just can't trust anything in New York. And I remember one of my first memories is going from the hotel over to the Piggly Wiggly grocery store to get something, just some snacks or something. And I remember it was in the morning and somebody walked by me and went, "Good morning, how are you?" And I just remember thinking, what do you want? What do you want? Stay away from me. I had my guard up. And then you just start to come to realize, like, no, they actually genuinely just are saying good morning to you. Yeah. It's Southern hospitality.
And I think also I remember Stacy being really surprised and delighted that the Piggly Wiggly wasn't a fictional place. That it was in like a movie like Fried Green Tomatoes or something like that.
Yeah, Driving Miss Daisy.
Driving Miss Daisy or whatever that was. And she's like, there really is a Piggly Wiggly.
Oh yeah, it's the best.
I have a bag from the Piggly Wiggly.
Oh, does it have the pig on it?
Yes, it does.
Another thing I remember early on, it's funny, I haven't thought much about Mothman in some time because the movie's been out for a while. And I'm glad we're doing this, but it's made me think back to some of these things early on and how much has changed. Do you remember when we went down there, a big reason why we kind of just went down to discuss this before pulling the trigger on doing the film was the town was very divided. It was way more controversial than it is now. It's kind of been accepted and it's mainstreamed and it's part of pop culture now. But when we went down there to talk about making this film, it was a 50-50 divide. You had people who did not want us there because there was this kind of battle for what the town was going to represent. There was a mixture of truly historical, routed in history, wars, conflicts, real heroes of the frontier and things like that. And then you had this kind of alternative history where some people just wanted it to go away. They did not want to embrace it or celebrate it or let alone promote it. And it wasn't even just about it being taboo. There was a lot of people who really thought and believed, if we continue to talk about this and promote it, it is like it's evil.
Yeah, well, it was like one end of Main Street was really into it and the other end of Main Street didn't want to have anything to do with it. I remember. Yeah,
I remember, talking to people and there were people who were like, "No, we don't want you to come here and do this. We don't want this story getting out there more than it already is." And then there were other people who were trying to, I think take like the lemons of the story and make it lemonade, try to put a positive spin on it or try to celebrate it and just look at it in a different perspective. But it was definitely much more, I felt at the time, like a divide amongst the town. Do you remember some of the other things that we heard when we were down there? This is fine. I don't mind talking about this stuff too. Like, early, you go out there and of course all this, some of this could be rumor. It's all part of the fun of it. But remember, like we get down there to the town and there are people like, "Oh no, you're from New York. This whole town is built on mafia money." And do you remember all those things do you remember those rumors that the town was like used to, launder money, like New York, because the New York City connection. There was some New York mobster that was connected to the town. Yeah, I don't know if this is real or not.
I vaguely remember this.
You don't remember that?
No.
I vaguely remember the stories. There were certain families, though, that were named.
Oh, really? You want to? Maybe we should just move on, or we're going to.
I think we'll be.
We'll end up at the bottom of the Kanawha River with cement shoes if we continue to talk about that. These are just, again, I'm trying to go back to some of the things I remember going out there. I remember the mountains and the weather. I remember early on, every single day, the forecast said it was going to rain. And then so we would be like, "Oh, well, I guess we can't film what we were going to film because it was all outdoors." and then every day just wouldn't rain. And I eventually came to the conclusion that the weathermen out there just basically predict rain every single day because the storms come off the mountains and they are unpredictable. Like it's more like, well, it could rain today. Every single day there's a possibility of rain.
Well, the thing I remember most of all as being the difference between New York, the quintessential example was, in New York, if you put your camera on a tripod and say you're in Central Park, the fastest way to find a cop is to do that because they will be on you so quick. They will looking for permits. They're looking for a permit and they'll say, no, you can't do that. And it's a lot to do with, terrorism and things like that. So when we went down there, it was a small skeleton crew, but we're setting up lights in the middle of the town square where the statue of the Mothman is. We're running lines across the street, electrical lines.
All of this without permits. We're just like, fuck it. We're just going to do it.
We just, and we're setting it up. So you're lit up like a Christmas tree.
Film style.
Right. But
we had the mayor with us. Not the mayor, but Jeff Walmsley, who pretty much is the mayor. This is when we were interviewing Jeff outside the Mothman statue. I don't remember what day it was. But I do remember we're setting up lights and doing all this stuff.
Yeah, it's at night.
Yeah.
So you can't miss us. It's lit up like a Christmas tree. And the cops come rolling in slow. And I'm like, oh, man, we're going to get shut down. They're going to make us do this and that. And it's just like, oh, we didn't even get the shot off yet. We were just about to shoot. Cops didn't even stop the car. Sticks his head out the window, goes, hey, you need a cop car for your movie? And just keeps on going. And doesn't nothing, just smiles and drives. And we're like, oh man, this is like...
It was outstanding.
Perfect.
Well, I think Denny Bellamy had told everyone what was going on. So they were prepared. It wasn't Jeff Walmsley, I think, that told everyone. I think it was Denny that told everyone.
Yeah, and this was during Jeff's interview, though. I distinctly remember this. We were setting up to interview Jeff at night at the statue. And there was only, our crew consisted of 4 people. And so I remember you and Neil were finishing up the lights and stuff for Jeff. And the cops, he rolled by, and I do also remember, and maybe this was 2 different times, but I remember a cop car coming up, and I was like, oh, God, we're going to get thrown out of here. So I just remember saying, like, let me see if I can talk to him. And then I do remember having a conversation with the police officer, and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, we're filming an interview for a documentary. And he was like, oh, do you need me to shut the streets down for you? And I was like,
I remember that.
You gotta be kidding me. Because again, back here in New York, everything costs money. Everything is an opportunity for people to take advantage of you. Where if you're filming anything, remember we needed to film the Freedom Tower a couple years ago. And, there's always like you try to either ask permission or forgiveness. And so at first we would try to do it the right way. And, by the time it was done, the city of New York wanted, I think, a $250,000 for us to film a shot of the Freedom Tower because it's a copyrightable object and it's owned by the Parks Department. It's just all red tape crap. And so filming here is always a nightmare. And so, yes, that was one of our first experiences filming there. It was a good one. And we're like, wait a minute, they help you here?
Yeah. Well, that was what opened up the idea of, we've been on a lot of shoots and we've worked a lot together where we're finding places where, oh, we'll never do this again or never try to shoot here again, or other places that you're like, oh, like when we shot in a high school, like this is and during the summertime, shooting in a high school is perfect because it has everything. It's almost like a studio. Bathrooms and smooth floors and electric and water source and a place where you can eat. There's parking, that whole thing. So when we were down in West Virginia, it was like, okay, we're nowhere near an airport, not a major airport, but there's no one here to bother you. You have an entire wooded area. You have a derelict house that you want to shoot a horror movie in. It just opens up so many opportunities where you're like, you don't have to be at a place where there's tons of studios. You don't have to be in New York or Hollywood. You can just find a place like this, and it's so freeing.
Oh yeah,
to be able to run a production.
Yeah, it was a great experience. I mean, every single outside of what I said earlier about people just being concerned about the topic and the subject matter we're going to talk about, with it being Mothman. I mean, once we were there, though, everybody just. Anything we needed. I mean, it was so accommodating. I'm trying to think of some of the early memories. I remember the traffic warning we were given. I remember where I think we were going to Ohio State University, I think on our first day to shoot an interview. And someone was like, whoa, you're going to Ohio State University? Like, you better leave on time. Traffic can be a bitch. And I just remember we left at rush hour. There was
Nobody.
not a drop.
No.
And again, traffic here in New York City, it's just, again, different way of life where, traffic here means I could sit in traffic for 2 hours and go less than 3 miles. I mean, you did it today on your way in.
Today.
How long did it take you to get here?
I left my house at 11 a.m. I needed to go what I believe is 17 total miles. And I got here at, I think it was 1:20.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 hours and 20 minutes door to door. And it's 17 miles. That's New York City. So you guys don't know traffic in West Virginia. I'm sorry, Ohio, I'm sorry. There's nothing, especially driving through West Virginia. They had a Senator Byrd for decades and decades. And apparently the highways in West Virginia were a top priority. When you drive in that state, it's like glass. There's no one else on the roads. It looks like the black top was put down that day, and you don't even realize. You look at your speedometer, you're going 95 miles an hour.
Yeah. They give you tickets for going under the speed limit.
Yeah.
Right? There are literally signs posted that saying like minimum speed this. If you don't go this, get out of the way. You think of the main street. I remember the Mothman Museum, which again now is like this big thing, and they've done an amazing job there. But the Mothman Museum was on the other side of the street, on the other side of town.
Was it? I didn't know that.
They were just getting their, you could see they were just getting things going. And I remember all that, and it's such good memories. It was minimal, it was small, but it was an idea. And what's been amazing is you see an idea grow over years into what it's become now. But just to be able to be there to be able to be there at that time and witness all this stuff, it's really been kind of a fun experience. And obviously, we've stayed in touch with the people that we've worked with down there. They've become friends of ours. I would call them friends. I speak to them fairly often whenever I can. I always think about them. We've gone back for a few projects in the town, film-wise, just because, again, it's been so accommodating and nice, and people have treated you so well. Why would you not go back?
Didn't you edit some of the film in West Virginia, too?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with all of these things, we're like, Jesus Christ, it's so easy to get around here. And honestly, things are so affordable. Well, yeah, you and I rented an apartment on the river.
Yeah.
And because we were like, we're going to need to come back and forth here for stuff, for archives and photos. We had to keep, kind of needing to go back there. So, and I cut some of the film there. Yeah. Which, do you remember how much it wasn't even an apartment, it was a house.
It was fully furnished.
Do you remember how much we paid?
$250 a month.
$250 a month.
A month.
$250 a month, all utilities, furnished, on the Ohio River. I would go fishing in the backyard. Our dog was there. And then we just did, because we're like, even if you don't.
You didn't try to talk him down?
That's what I was thinking. It's the cost of a cell phone.
Right.
I remember too, when we were doing location scouting, I remember we went, do you remember that house we saw? I think it was on 100 acres on top of a mountain. It was beautiful. And I think it was $250,000 that back then to buy that house.
Yeah. I think we all, since we're coming from the New York area and we have a Brooklyn girl here, that it took a little bit. When we shot down there, it was 3 weeks. And so we had to live down there. And when we first got there, we all had kind of like a New York attitude of let's go. I need a bagel at 2:00 in the morning, and where's the place to do that?
Good luck.
Right. I mean, you just couldn't do that. And you're like, oh my God, they closed the hotel. Like, I should be able to go in.
We got to talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, it was just like this whole mentality that we had that we were kind of like, what do you people do around here? Let's get this going.
Right.
And
hurry
then,
up.
Hurry up. And then slowly as it went on, you start to, the days go by and you're like, why am I in such a hurry? Where am I going? Why do I need a bagel at 2:00 in the morning? Why can't I just take our time? There's no traffic. There's nobody behind you like go.
Yeah, it's a different way of life and a better way of life.
Yeah. And it's certainly better for your mentality. And then by the time the 3 weeks were up and we were still down there, we were moving at that type of pace. We were West Virginia pace. And then by the time we got back here, you're seeing all these people rushing to get their trains and pushing on the subway and all this stuff. And you're like, what is wrong with you people?
That's why everybody here's so angry and frustrated and stressed out. Because everything here is a fight. Everything's a battle. And just things, slow isn't bad.
Right.
Really,
It wasn't like going on vacation where you got nothing to do. But the thing is, even when you do that, airport, traffic, Uber, get here, have fun, eat the dinner, and then get back.
About the airport in West Virginia, it's about, what is it, an hour outside of Point Pleasant, maybe more?
I don't think I've seen that much.
You can drive up to the terminal and just let someone off, and get off and get right on a plane. It's in Charleston. Remember, I mean, I had to drive you to the airport. Remember, I drove you right to the terminal.
Oh, you're not talking about the older gentleman who gave us the ride.
No.
Okay.
No.
Which was just
commercial flights.
He let me steer the plane.
Right. He had no, and that was your first plane ride.
Yeah.
That was the first time you were ever in a plane.
I'd never been on an airplane.
And it was a 2-seater.
It was a 2-seater. Well, I was afraid to fly back then because I was, again, super young, just hadn't traveled much. We went out there and, that was, again, like we went out there and I had a plan of who I wanted to interview and what we were going to talk about. But outside of that, there really was no plan of shooting recreations or any other footage. It really all was just spur of the moment opportunities. Like someone would say, oh, do you want to film some aerial photography? Again, this is before drones were available. And there was a World War II pilot who had a plane with a photo window that you could stick your camera out. And, we went and did that. I think it cost us like $75.
I don't think it was even that much. And the thing is, it's like, okay, we need to schedule it. Is it a week from now? When can we do it? It was just like, hey, you doing? All right, get in the plane.
Right. Not only did we go shoot it, we got, it's great production value. It adds, makes your film look like you have money. And he let you drive the fucking plane. I mean, and I don't know if, things are different now, right? They don't really let people do that type of stuff anymore.
Well, I bet you they would down there. I bet you they would. I mean,
probably.
But that was the ease of it. It was just like, okay, no permits, just go. And,
Yeah, it's simple. And honestly, there's no need for some of this overkill of everything. You can't do anything in this area without it being a problem. You can't. And down there, it's not that it's just, the Wild West. It's just, once people get to know you, they know you. That's the part of the whole thing of it being a small town. Oh, these guys are here for this reason. And you sit down and you talk to them. It's not about being slow. It's about them trying to get to know you, see if they trust you. And once they trust you, they'll help you. But I definitely remember that sense too, of feeling like an outsider and, needing to, that was the other reason why we just went down there. Because I do remember this now. We talked about like, look, people from New York can be assholes, and people in the film community in New York can be assholes, and they just go somewhere and they think you're doing them a favor by allowing you to film them. These people were not dying to tell their story back then. They were not looking to have a camera on them and talk about, this thing that they saw. That's another thing we definitely should talk about. None of these people that we really interviewed were dying to do this. They did it, but it wasn't like they wanted a get-rich-quick 5 minutes of fame thing. All of the interviews that we set up, again, at the time, we were the strangers from New York, the people with cameras, and could be an agenda, and there could be some reason behind it. And we just kind of had to go out there to build trust with people. And that was the reason why we went out to the first festival, just to meet people, talk with them, and just let them know who we are.
Well, do you remember when we stayed at the Low Hotel, the guy who owned it, his name Rush? I can't remember. Rush said, like, while we were there, that he was pleasantly surprised because when he heard we were from New York, he was expecting a bunch of foul-mouthed assholes, is what he said. And he
that was the first
surprised.
day he met us. Don't forget, we had stayed 20 days, and by the end, he might have changed his opinion. Because do you remember that we got to talk about the Low Hotel? Do you remember, we were, I was in my 20s. How old were you? Were you even, you were young.
I wasn't even born.
No.
I was
you were 23.
23, 24.
You were very young.
Wait a minute. Wait, you were born?
I was born in 81.
Oh, 81. Okay, so you're 24.
Yeah.
How old were you around?
I was 35.
Really? You were 35. So we were all young, and, again, coming from New York, it's like you go out, have drinks, you have late dinners. Dinner is sometimes at 10 p.m.
Right.
And it's a different lifestyle. And I remember...
There's no such thing as an after-dinner place.
Well, I remember, we stayed at the Low Hotel, which is kind of the historic hotel right on Main Street. They were incredibly nice to us. I don't even know if they charged us, to be honest with you. They were big supporters of the project and really good people. But the hotel, and I'm sure it's changed now, maybe it hasn't, but do you remember every room had a key, an actual key?
It was like a skeleton
like
key.
a pirate key.
Yeah, a key that you would have for a door from 1910.
Yes, and so,
Don't lose it.
We would be filming these long days, and we're young and wanted to go out and do things. And so I think we ended up traveling to maybe some of the more college cities in the area. There are, some things to do there. Point Pleasant's kind of remote, but there's surrounding areas that you can go do some stuff late night. But do you remember that the hotel used to lock the lobby? And so we would be getting back at like 3 a.m.
I know, but they would lock it at like 10 p.m.
But we would get back at like 3 a.m. with plans of getting up 4 hours from them to go film more, because it's just what you do when you're young and dumb and filming. And I just remember after like the 6th day, like we're getting back so late, whatever you want to call it. I just remember literally the owner of the hotel, who's I'm assuming living there or staying there. I remember him getting out of bed. You have to ring the buzzer to like let you back in. I just remember at some point he's like, I'm just going to give you the fucking key to the lobby. Because we kept waking him up in the middle of the night because, we would come back. And I remember our first time we're like, what? Like the lobby's locked?
Yeah. I've never seen them close a hotel, like shut it down. It's like locking a hospital. It's always open.
Oh God, that was so funny. And, but again, they were just great people. And it was just a, two kind of worlds colliding, the East Coast New Yorkers and the West Virginia way of life there. I also, when I think about the early memories there, obviously the Low Hotel, you think about the Mothman Museum, you think about the River Museum, right? And that's funny too. Like you have two sides of town, like you said. Literally at one end of the town is the River Museum, which is, celebrates the long history of the riverboat traffic. The Point Pleasant is literally at the point of where two rivers merge. And so going back through their history, riverboats and river life, it was a big part of their history and past. And so that's all celebrated in this beautiful river museum, which is what it's called, right next to that park. And then you had the Mothman Museum kind of early stages being built at the other side of town. And there was definitely that divide. And the owners of the head of the River Museum was a great person, Jack Fowler. He helped us a ton as well. But even them too, they were kind of like, they would look at us like, wait a minute, like, you're doing a Mothman documentary. Like, yes. Like, and you're going to interview people about the American Revolution. Yes. Like, they also were just like, I don't understand how this fits. And I'm like, well, that's what's going to make this different. We're not doing you're a bunch of dumb idiots. Because they would also say that too, you're going to make us look like a bunch of dumb bumpkins. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
Yeah,
we're going to actually treat this with respect.
That's the default for a lot of people in that part. I mean, there are people from Gallipolis, which is literally right across the Ohio River.
Look at you knowing how to pronounce it. Remember when we were out there?
That's only because they don't.
But remember when we were out there, we were like, Gallipoli, and then like
Gallipoli.
we're like, no, now you know it. And you're like, it's Gallipolis.
Yeah, it's Gallipolis. And they, literally you can virtually kick a football across the river right there. But they will make fun of people from West Virginia. They're Buckeyes. They're not, they're from Ohio.
What did that girl, I am a Buckeye.
I am a Buckeye.
Well, we said, what part of West Virginia are you from? And she was like,
yeah, well, that's the thing.
I am not from West Virginia. I am from Gallipolis, and I am a Buckeye. And
right.
Like, it's literally right there.
Right.
It's
I can
right
see
there.
it. I'm standing. It's right there. But the thing is, other people from West Virginia make fun of the people from Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Like, oh, no, that's west. That's down there. And they have a default defense system that when they find out that you're not from around there, especially if they find out that you're from New York, that they're like, oh, yeah, you think we're just a bunch of country bumpkins. You think we're just all, married our sister and things like that. Oh, I've heard it a lot. Like before you even say anything to them, like, hi, oh, they could tell by your voice. And they're like, you think you're, they're just so defensive. And I think that was what was going on when they heard that a movie was being made about this area, where they said, okay, it's not just being made fun of. We're going to have a documentary for all time that's going to be doing that. And it took a little convincing to say that, no, that's not going to happen here.
Yeah. And I'd like to think that we were, maybe not intentionally, like a part of helping grow and shift the narrative of things in town in a positive way. I really do. Like at that time, like I said, it was just the Keel book. There was Jeff's book. There was nothing else out there, the Richard Gere movie. And I think if we had made some like sensationalized, like look at all, just looking down on people. We never looked down on anybody about their opinion on anything there. It was always approached with a amount of respect for the fact of just, and it's just opinion, right? We're not saying give us the facts of this case. It's just, what did you see? What did you see? What did, they were there. They lived it. We just got the opinions of people there. And, and it's simple. I think people try to overproduce things too much, or they have I worked for the news for a long time. And one thing that the news used to always do wrong, which is just ridiculous to me, is, I've seen this on stories that I was unfortunately a part of, where the news will have a preconceived notion about what a story is. What are you going to go film? Especially when you have to travel into a place like this that's different. You're going out to, Montana or West Virginia or Ohio, and you're going to interview a soldier about his story. What happens is a producer often has preconceived notions about what the story is going to be and what they're going to get. And then when they get out there, when it doesn't match, they don't go, well, let me adjust my side to give this truth and integrity. They go, oh, no, I had this whole plan. And they try to trick you and scheme you into answering questions that'll fit your narrative. And to me, it's as simple. Like it's not about you. It's about the person you're interviewing. And of course, there's always some creative liberty with it. But just the idea that there's something special you're doing by just treating somebody with respect for the truth. But it actually went a long way for us. Last thing I'll say about that I remember with the town, and again, they're like fun, good memories. Do you guys remember the internet and what you had to do for the internet?
You mean in the hotel or
just in the town? First,
to get it for your phone.
I think we had to go to Wendy Way Park to get internet.
There was only one place you could get the internet. It was at the public park, the outside park.
I remember Justin going there every day.
Yeah.
To go online.
He was on the laptop walking around like a crazy person in a park. I mean, and I remember, this is like a perfect example. I remember going like, what? Like, and this was like early 2000s. So I remember them saying, we don't have Wi-Fi yet. The town didn't have Wi-Fi yet. It literally did not have Wi-Fi. But there was one spot you can go to get strong internet and Wi-Fi, and that was at the 2ND Way Park, which is a beautiful park down at the end of Main Street.
Well, it's because, we were getting the River Museum's internet or Wi-Fi. It was reaching across the street. That's why you couldn't go too far into the park. You had to kind of stay by the street.
Well, the funny thing is we did it so often. You were there for 3 weeks that you're like, you say, where are you going? And you have a computer. I'm just going to get online for a quick second. And you just see somebody walking down the street. Can you drive me down the street so I can check my email? That kind of thing. And it got so common that if you saw somebody walking in that direction with a laptop, you're like, yeah, that's what you're doing. Elevator?
Only in the headphone.
It went away. That's strange.
There it is.
Signal. That was Signal. Here we go. Curse of Cornstalk strikes again. No, it's a good point. I remember my first reaction was like, what the fuck? I have to literally leave my hotel, walk down the street. I remember thinking it's an inconvenience. But then you get, you start to go, well, this is where I have to go to use the internet. But then you know what? You start to go, I'm in a beautiful park. The sun is setting. I'm sitting on a bench. There's birds nearby. There's boats going by. And then you realize, like, you're just kind of an asshole. Like, you're just...
Yeah, you get down there and you check your email and you're like, there's nothing here that was worth the walk. Like, what?
Right.
Why do I have to check my email? You're the only people that I need to contact at this moment. I'm working.
Yeah, cell phone service wasn't good.
No.
But then you start to realize I don't need all this shit.
Yeah.
And it was a nice removal from being here in the city. So, it's like anything. It all depends on how you take in the information and absorb it. Maybe sometimes something that seems like a negative is actually not a negative. You're just absorbing it that way, and it's actually a blessing in disguise. So let's get into a little bit about like the production. We had gone out there, they said we pre-scouted, we met people, we connected, we networked with them. We felt like this was a good idea. I did a ton of pre-production work in terms of setting up interviews. I had done research online, found people. I was trying to get a really wide net of perspectives, not just people who saw the Mothman, but people who could speak on it in an educated manner. Professors, there were multiple kind of potential origin stories of the creature, but really I was open and I was open to talk to pretty much anyone who wanted to talk to us, except that one asshole, the one guy who on the last day of filming down there reached out to us, and I remember he emailed me saying, "I dare you to interview me, but I know you're too scared because my theories are too radical for you." And anytime you get an email like that, you're like, I'm not going anywhere near you because you sound fucking crazy.
Is that the guy who made that other quote unquote
I'm not even going to spend time on him, but it was just like, that's the only person we did not interview. And for the longest time, he was always like like bothered. And it's like, buddy, you approached us in an aggressive, negative manner. Do you think that was a good, like, if it would have just been, hey, I've got some interesting theories, but it was, I dare you, I challenge you, and you won't do it. And it was our last day in town.
He had all this animosity for no reason. He never even actually met us. It was like bizarre. And he had it out for you.
And he was not from West Virginia, I will say.
Yeah.
I don't believe he wasn't local. He was.
No, I don't think so.
Just a kook. Oh, also, let's just talk quickly, like, why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this?
So, again, this was the first thing, this was the first major, meaning feature-length documentary I had ever done. The film ended up being pretty popular. I remember we got it into Best Buys. It was on Discovery Channel internationally and in Europe. There were multiple versions of the film that got put out. It ended up really surpassing, I think, my expectations of where it was going to go. My goal was just to make a good film that I really wanted the people of Point Pleasant to be happy with. I know that there was a ton of concern at the time about making a film about the topic because it wasn't mainstream, it wasn't celebrated. It was just in its infancy with the festival in terms of like, how are we going to embrace this colorful past? And we were kind of looked at by some people as a potential threat that, maybe this wasn't a good thing. So my biggest goal was just to tell an honest, truthful story that was not biased, did not have an opinion, but more so just focused on the facts and details from the people who witnessed it. I mean, it's called Eyes of the Mothman because, there's a famous saying that I've always liked, which is the eyes are the gateway to the soul. And the idea was just that you're hearing a story that's sensational, but you're hearing a story from a multitude of people, from a multitude of backgrounds, all with different reasons and relevance to the story. And you're left to believe and make of it whatever you want to make of it. And so I think that's why, it ended up kind of striking a chord with a lot of people, and it's kind of become a little bit of a timeless thing. It's still very popular. And it's funny. It went from like, we're not sure if we want these people here to do this, and it turned into, here, if you want to know about our town, watch this movie. And like, that is, I think a great thing that I'm definitely proud of.
Yeah, because there's so many other things besides the Mothman, about the Silver Bridge and about Cornstalk and about, and the Men in Black and all that kind of stuff, all the stuff that revolves around the town. The Mothman is the most prominent, but it's one of several pretty strange happenings in the one town. The film is filled with it. It's a long movie.
Right, because the thing is, you can't not go after the subject and leave some of these things out. I mean, honestly, there were still things that we left out, which is actually partly why we're doing this. Over the years, the Mothman story has really grown in popularity. The festival has grown in popularity, and without really knowing it, our material that we covered and documented out there has kind of become almost like a historical record. It's part of their history. And there's not many people that interviewed the type of people that we interviewed. Many of them have passed away now. And so, people, since the movie's been out, have always reached out to us. It's always had a good fan base. And throughout the years, some people have said, like, well, you guys should do a podcast or something. And so the idea is that we're having this conversation, and I'm sure this will be an episode or maybe broken down into more than one episode. But the idea is that we're going to release the raw interviews, our field interviews that we did with all these people. They're just going to be released as episodes We'll maybe discuss a little bit about them and tee them up in a minimal fashion. But it's really just, I don't know how entertaining it's going to be, but it's definitely going to be the idea that if you wanted to hear the unscripted, unedited interviews we conducted with these eyewitnesses and experts, they're now going to live in this form. And hopefully it will, hopefully for people who are into the subject matter, will be just another outlet of information that they'll be able to use in their own work and research and just for their own entertainment. Let's go talk about the production a little bit. I think it was 18 days. I think it was maybe 18, 20 days, 3 weeks, something like that. Do you remember how we left New York? Our van was packed to the brim with equipment. I remember looking in the rearview mirror and I could only see Anastasia's little head surrounded by things, which was probably incredibly dangerous.
It was a short drive, though.
Yeah.
I remember you couldn't move. You literally didn't have an option of moving.
We stopped to go to the bathroom, and I needed help from all three of you to get out from the back of the van.
Yeah.
It was about, how many hours was it to drive to West Virginia?
It's about 10, 12-hour drive.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Yeah, probably closer to 12. But we had what was the van? It wasn't an Astro van.
It was a Windstar.
It was a Ford Windstar Gold packed with gear.
Well, it was not packed with gear. It was packed with every piece of gear that we owned at the time.
Well, and then it died when we got back.
I know.
Literally, we parked
in front of your house.
We parked at home.
Actually, I was thinking about this. Are you
It never started again.
It never started again.
But didn't it die on the way out and we had to get it fixed in town? Did that not happen? Or that was
I don't think it was.
That was Pittsburgh.
That was
Pittsburgh.
That when the transmission got torn up.
Yeah.
Was that after Mothman? That car was,
it was.
Yeah. Not that it's related to this, but it's just, were you with us on that trip in Pittsburgh?
Oh, yeah. We were on the flatbed.
Do you remember when?
I remember Dan was with us, too.
When the car died. Do you remember when the mechanic called? What the timing of it? We were waiting. The car had issues and we brought it to a mechanic outside of Pittsburgh on a separate trip. And I had gotten a call from the mechanic to let me know that the car is basically dead and never coming back to life. But do you remember when that happened? We went to a local amusement park. It was like a rinky-dink
yes, I have
great
pictures.
adventure thing.
I have photos
And I remember we were on a ride where it was like a flume going through water, and there was just these little evil things going and I'm I answered the phone in the middle of the ride, and I'm like, how's it going? And the mechanic's like, your car's dead and it ain't ever going to work again. And then it was just Garfield's and I'm like, oh, this is a fucking great ride.
Oh, God.
There was just all these animated characters just laughing at me that this car is done. But yeah, the start of its downfall of that car was, I think, the Mothman trip. We pulled, into the outside of our house in Brooklyn, and
it never
died.
started. It was literally parked directly in front of your house. I remember because my car was there for the 3 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
I met you in Brooklyn, and you pulled it in. I got in my car. I said goodbye, and that was it. That was the end of it.
It was just four of us, right? It was pretty, and it just makes me think this is when I say it's good memories. We were all younger. It was early in our careers, I think. And it was just fun. It's four friends out to make a film.
Yeah.
And it was a fun time. And then later on, you grow as a filmmaker and you become a professional and this becomes a career. And then you look at all of the stuff, the frivolous things bigger sets and bigger crews and catering and craft service and stuff. And you just start to look I don't know, this was still probably one of the more fun things. Just four friends making a movie.
Well, it was away from all of the normal pressures of not being able to park and drive and all, like we said. But yeah, it was four of us. Anyone listening to this podcast, watching this broadcast, this is 75% of the entire crew.
Yeah.
Everything, sound, picture.
Or we didn't even have a
production.
sound person.
Right.
We did the sound.
We piped the microphones directly into the cameras, and that was it. But
and now I'm like, when we don't have a second sound assistant, I'm like, what a shitty production this is going to be. We don't even have a third assistant to help with audio.
Anybody who remembers some of the shots that we were doing, we had just like I said, we packed all the equipment, all the lights, all the stands, all the gels, all the stuff that we owned into that thing, and we drove down there, and we were in the hotel the last night. And you were like, I want to get shots of an eye, and I need a shot of a doorknob and the keyhole, and and all these kind of experimental things that we were like, all right, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. We have to we have to get on the road tomorrow to go back home and give the camera back to the rental place. So it was that part of the fun of making films, of making something, of fabricating. Okay, let's get the smoke machine and put it here, and let's put some makeup on your eye and get a shot of the eye, and let's shine a light. And so I'll put the camera and we'll just tilt it and move it like this, and we'll get all these oblique shots. And it was just kind of like, it was fun. That's why you do it. Like, okay, let's just make this up.
We all of us, I think, even Matt, we all made appearances in the documentary.
That's right.
Yeah, we were all. I mean, the only thing we had planned going out there was the interviews. That's the only thing that was pre-set up, were the interviews and the questions I was going to ask them, the talking head interviews. Everything else was spur of the moment opportunities that just came up with, like, someone going, oh, hey, we know a guy who dresses up like a Native American. You want us to film him? And we're like, yeah, sure. I mean, do you remember too, our dolly? I made our dolly with plywood and PVC pipe from Home Depot, which
oh, God, I just remember that.
It was handmade. I made a handmade dolly because we didn't have any money. I think we even made sandbags out of sand from Home Depot.
Wow.
We did.
Couldn't even afford sandbags.
Seriously.
But it was fun. It's been so much time now, but you look back, it was just such a good time. A lot of people over the years have asked, like, why I didn't put myself in the movie. And I just always thought it was a weird question. I don't really like, it's funny. I'm not going to say I don't like documentaries like that. I do like documentaries like that, but I just didn't think this made any sense. Like, this wasn't my story. This wasn't about my experience going into Appalachia and what it was going to be like. That might have been something interesting that's different, but it wasn't the point. So whenever people ask that, I just think that it's self-indulgent and it shifts the focus of what this is supposed to be about. I wasn't looking for my 5 minutes of Mothman fame. I was trying to tell a story, and I was trying to be respectful to the people that it was about, which is the people that were out there.
Yeah, that's certainly a style of interjecting yourself, almost like a investigative journalist does, where you kind of narrate it for and spoon feed it for the audience. Sometimes that can work, and sometimes it invades the piece, and you're kind of taken out of the whole mystique that you're trying to create when you kind of walk in there and have to tell these people what is what. The film does it by itself, and I think that especially because you're an outsider from here. If you were from West Virginia, if you were from Point Pleasant, that might have been a different story, but it would have been out of place, I think. I think that style for this type of story.
I wasn't trying to be the next John Keel either. And that's the other thing. I always find this funny. People always ask me, like, why didn't I put anything about John Keel in the movie? John Keel was a researcher and reporter and writer who documented the same subjects. It's like I'm doing the same thing. I'm pulling from some of his information to use as source material because there was nothing else. But I was trying to make my own movie too. I wasn't just trying to regurgitate the book.
Yeah,
so, why would I write something about the writer of the same subject? It's strange.
At this point, when we first started doing a Mothman, the only reference point for most people were the Mothman prophecies. That was the movie. And when you every time you said Mothman, they were like, oh yeah, like the movie, like the Richard Gere movie. That was their only way. Now, after 18 years, this documentary is the reference point for a lot of people. And, no one ever says to John Keel, why didn't you put Mount Pellowski in your story? Nobody does that. And that would be ridiculous. You each have your own stories. But, there was recently a guy I talked to. It wasn't even about the Mothman. It was about cinematography and my career. And he said, I really just watch documentaries. And he's like, do you work on any of those? I said, yeah, an unlimited number of them. And he's like, do you, anything I would know? You should. I said, yeah, you can get this and that. And I said, you can watch this other Mothman, The Eyes of the Mothman. He goes, seen it twice, already own it. Yeah. Like it's like that. This documentary is now the reference point. This is it.
It's amazing how that's happened. There was somebody here 2 weeks ago from Ireland, and he was like, I love me a good documentary. And I just made a joke and I said, well, you're in the presence of the director of The Eyes of the Mothman and the Sound Man, because Bill was here. And he went, you're fucking kidding me. And he was like, he knew the movie exactly. He was like, never been more impressed by something.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much the movie has gotten out there. And you know,
there's kind of also a pride of being like, it's us four. That's it.
Right. There was no, giant crew. And then with the John Keel thing, it was just like, you know, if you want John Keel's opinion on the subject matter, you can just read his book. And you know, there are some correlations that cross over of storytelling that happen in our movie and his book. But it's funny. It's a question that has come up a ton over the years as to why we did not put John Keel in the book, why we did not put John Keel in the film. And I just thought it was always a strange question because it also becomes self-aware. Like, you're talking about someone who reported, like his relevance to the subject matter is the same relevance as we are. We're outsiders documenting a story. I'm not going to document the documentation of another person documenting the story. It just doesn't make sense. And plus, I wanted our film to stand on its own 2 feet. Now, our first interview was in Ohio, but I remember we also, again, we had no plans to shoot recreations, but I remember someone saying like, oh, well, you know, you can film here, you can film there. And one of the first things that they said, well, you can film in the courthouse. Do you want to go see it? And remember, one of the first things we did was scout the local courthouse. And there's a few things I remember with that. Do you remember, this was I think it might have even been the day that we rolled into town, just kind of got our footing. And then people were like, oh, you want to look around and see what the town's like? We went into the courthouse and there was a politician. Do you remember the guy that was there? He was like literally the spitting stereotypical image of a politician. And
Mayor Quimby.
he honestly, he looked like Kennedy.
Yeah.
And I remember someone said, you know, these guys are here to film a documentary on the Mothman. And he went, why? He goes, you didn't tell them that was just Joe's cousin with the costume on? And he said it in such a matter-of-fact way. I literally like sank and died inside because I'm like, did I just come all the way out here? Is this some fucking hoax? You know, because he said it like, oh, everyone knows that's Jim Andy's cousin who wore that costume. And he was just making a joke, I learned later. But it was also, again, that whole like divide of like, no, there is no story here. Like, that's nonsense and stupid. Do not, you know, there's no point in doing that. But I did, like, I literally died inside because, you know, I'm not saying I want it to be real or not, but if you were to learn that it was a hoax, it would just ruins everything. And it wasn't, obviously, but he was just making a joke. But that was like an early memory I had too, scouting that courthouse, which we shot. Do you remember the scenes we shot in the courthouse later?
I remember being in the courthouse. I remember like the stuff on the tabletop.
I remember Justin on the dolly.
Yes,
with a wig and glasses
on his knees. On his knees. And I remember he was making that like that noise. Yeah. Justin Masler, who's the fourth person in our crew who's not here, also goes by the name of Cloud Star Chaser. One of our more eccentric friends, I guess you could say. Was a good sport and was in the film quite a bit as Injured Cold. He was in as the Men in Black, along with you, Neil. And he was in as we were doing a recreation of a story. There was a reporter in town named Mary Heyer, and she was like, at the time of all these sightings, was the person people would go to report these things. She kind of became just the go-to person for local people to report their strange stories. And so we were recreating one of those events, which was that a minute-sized, weird Men in Black type person paid her a visit at her office. And so we were shooting in the courthouse as the background. And yeah, I remember we put Justin on a dolly and we're wheeling him in on his knees. We lit him fairly dark so you couldn't really see because we were, weren't working with much. And I just remember the dolly falling over and him falling over and just being unstable and just with a big smile on his face. I think we weren't going to use any sound. So I remember telling him, like, you can do whatever you want. So I just remember him going like, yeah. the whole time, like just making weirdo noises.
Well, we also used the guy down at the end of the road who had the vintage cars.
Oh yeah,
and he was also the shadowy figure that was, the silhouetted up against the house when he ran by. That was also Justin.
Oh yeah.
Remember? Yeah, well, that's
right.
the thing. When we went out there, we're like, we don't have a budget for this. We don't have money to rent picture cars or locations or recreation actors. We don't have money for that. But then when you get out there, people just start offering. They go, do you want to use this 1950s convertible? Do you want to use this house? And so we were like, yes. And it was just, it really was a blessing to be there. And it was like one of those times was just the right time, the right place, the right project. Things just kept being offered to us, and it made the film, better in what it was. But none of that was planned. All of that was just last minute. And also, too, this was before HD. We shot this on tape.
Standard definition, yeah.
We shot it on tape. As I had to go through the archives of these to, dig these interviews out of the vault. I'm like, I forgot these are on tape. They're on tape.
I didn't remember that, but how many tapes did we burn?
30 plus tapes.
At least,
from what I could
would
find,
say.
maybe more, 40, 50, something like that. And we just didn't know the story. So it was kind of hard to plan. And we, like I said, we planned the interviews and everything else was just the last days. And we literally grabbed people off the street too. Remember? We grabbed the guy who worked at the Mothman Museum. He became our Woodrow Derenberger, Todd. Remember Todd?
I remember Todd.
And he was great. That's the thing.
Yes.
The real people. So like and honestly, like we're not going to go on a Terrence Malick tangent, but like that's my all-time favorite filmmaker. And he's known for doing this. Well, he'll go shoot a Hollywood movie and go, get that guy who works in the steel mill and put him on camera because he just looks chiseled and out of like a real person, a real American person, not a fake Hollywood thing.
Yeah.
And we didn't do that on purpose, but we grabbed people off the street, shot townspeople, people donated their time and like,
I remember shooting him in that truck, right?
Oh, he looked great.
And that there are people that you're like, you meet them in real life or you audition them or whatever. I have a friend, Pete, who's exactly like that. Like he just works for Con Ed. He's not an actor, doesn't want to be an actor. Suddenly somebody puts him in something and you're like, okay, rolling. And you look at him on the screen and he just pops like you wouldn't believe. And that's what Todd was. Todd had like that really kind of down home, like if you were making a movie about the 1930s Depression era, run out and get him because he looks exactly like the typical American from that era. He just had that face, and that's like the kind of, I don't know if you want to use magic, but there was kind of the thing that we lucked out in all of these and then that beautiful car that we're able to use, that pickup truck from the era that we had to do the reenactments. And then we were able to get the reflections in the mirrors, and it just worked.
Yeah, it was great. People donated things, generators to us, cars. And I had never heard this term before I went out there, but people would always say like, oh, they're salt of the earth people. And then that's what they are. They're real people. And it just worked. There was a lot of improvising. There's no casting. Like, again, we sound like douchebag snobs now, but can you think of like making something now without casting and catering, like, and all those things that come with production? Like, we didn't have any of that, but it was still
I wouldn't have gone.
One of the most fun things we've ever done. And it just goes to show you don't need all that frivolous shit. It was a good time, and it was a successful project. It's not like we made it and it went to a film festival and nobody saw it. It ended up, being on shelves of Best Buys and things.
Yeah, I mean, it's sold well, and man, you get your money's worth. It's just the amount of volume of story in it. It's like, is it over 3 hours?
I think it's 2 hours 20 minutes. Something.
Is it
2 hours 20 minutes? Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's a lot of content, and there was a lot of, I remember you really obsessing over even the poster, even the cover of the DVD and the movie poster. It was Sarah's eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, even that, it's like
Sarah Lukasiewicz. Yeah,
we even set up a whole shoot just to film her, the shape of her eyes.
Right, just to get a photograph of her eyes, and then to do everything after that, and all of the different versions of the Mothman poster that you had, and all the different fonts and the different styles, and it was just like every little detail. Because when you're doing it yourself, You don't have to wait for, you'd send that out to some graphic designer and they'd, send it through some panel of people who worked for some production
noted
company.
by network executives.
And not have any input at all. Yeah.
It just goes to show too, to this day, it's still one of the most successful things I've done. And it's one of the only things I've done that wasn't noted by executives or executive producers or changed or altered to cater to some demographic that's never going to watch the film anyway.
Right.
So many commercial things you work on get ruined. I've worked on so many things over the years that could have been good projects that have been ruined because there's too many hands in it.
Right. You wouldn't have gotten 220. That would have been cut down.
Never.
You would have had somebody else mix it, do the music, take that out, and just put it in without your permission. Change the title, blah 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 blah, and it wouldn't have been yours. It wouldn't have been your decisions, and it just shows you also that all those people you don't need because of the success of the documentary, and it still has so much life to it. It's not something that you make like these people have these time. Appropriate things like, if you did a documentary about the emerging internet or something like that in 2006, it would have been dead in 6 months. It had just been passé. But we're talking about things that happened in history. We're talking about things that people are still talking about, and it's growing. The Mothman Festival, I guess it's 20 years now, right?
It's got to be more than that, yeah.
I think the 20th anniversary, was. I feel like I just saw it online, 20th anniversary, maybe a year or two ago.
Yeah.
So
And it's grown. I know, I don't know the last time you've been there, but Anastasia and I went back for something, and it's huge. There's thousands of people that go there. There's rides, there's tours, there's amusement park type games and stuff. Like, it's grown into a huge thing. I remember the first year we were there, it's a couple of people under a tent. It's always getting rained on. I still remember seeing, Chad Lambert selling his comic books under that tent the first year we were there, who has, obviously become a good friend of ours and was a huge contributor to our project. But, he and I have stayed in touch, and we would always laugh and talk like, wow, it's grown along. It's come a long way since the early days of, just a few people under some tents to talk to.
Yeah.
Now it's, it's a big thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and I think this documentary probably can be attributed to the success of that and the knowledge of what it is, because they did a great job. I mean, there's now a statue, a stainless steel statue of a Mothman in the city center, the same place that you would have a statue of George Washington or something like that. And the funny thing is, we were in that area for another production, and we found out when we were doing some research about Point Pleasant, about any other historical things, the designer of the Jeep, the World War II Jeep that, it got its name of the iconic brand that's still around, was from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, went to the university, I believe, I'm embarrassed I don't remember his name, but that is a very important, significant 20th century inventor and designer. And that's the person who should be having a statue, would think. But Mothman has become so big there that it's different.
I'm pretty sure that also the surgeon who performed the first cesarean is also from Point Pleasant.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little town. I mean, it's a little kind of a speck on the water. You wouldn't think that something like that. I mean, how many people live in Point Pleasant? 5,000?
I honestly don't know the population, but it's small.
Yeah.
It's a tiny little town. It's weird. It has also, since going there, little things have popped up from Point Pleasant in my life that has been so strange. I remember, another kind of side obsession of mine was the Zodiac case from San Francisco, the serial killer. And, fairly obscure subject. I mean, it's not.
Is it an obscure subject?
I mean, it's kind of niche. I mean, how many people are it's popular, but it's fairly niche. And same thing with, again, Terrence Malick, my all-time favorite filmmaker. Years later, I'd read the Zodiac book that was just another kind of side, weird, obscure story that I gravitated towards. And in the book, in one chapter, does the author, the Zodiac killer, actually, not even the author of the book, but the Zodiac killer mentions in one of his letters Terrence Malick and the Silver Bridge from Point Pleasant. And I was like, what the fuck?
So you're the killer.
Just to talk about like degrees of separation or the odds of like those several bizarre stories or topics of interest, like crossing paths is so strange. You know, and another thing I do remember when we got back here, you know, you could say like, oh, this is just maybe being aware of it, but Almost Heaven by John Denver. I literally, I don't remember a single time ever hearing that song before going to West Virginia. And then coming back, I remember I was working a night job in the city at the time here. And I remember it coming on over the radio in what was the hot dog place that was always popular? What are those? Papaya. I remember it coming on there, and that song followed me for years and years after we went to Point Pleasant. I would just hear it all the time. Everywhere I went, it would start to pop up.
It was on the radio on the way here, by the way.
Was it?
Yeah.
This is so strange.
I swear to God.
The other thing I remember was being out there, I remember two things, Golden Corral and Bob Evans.
Oh my God, Golden Corral, Neil.
Oh. Well, it was, you know, we were even talking about that when we were down there as far as a production thing. Like, oh my God, you know, you allot money for people's craft services every day in film production, and they're allotted a certain amount of dollars per meal. And so when you go to Golden Corral, it was like $8 or something like that, and you can eat all you want. And you're like, we're going to do all our films down here because they have a Golden Corral right across the bridge. And it was the first one I had ever seen. And it was good.
It was good.
It was good.
Oh, it was absolutely fantastic.
I mean, we would load ourselves up. And especially when there really wasn't any other place to go. I mean, it was a small town. And so we didn't have a kitchen.
That was our
we were
go-to.
staying in a hotel. So you didn't cook for yourself, or you didn't even have a fridge. So that was just like when you saw the Golden Corral.
And that was our go-to. The Golden Corral
I like
and Bob Evans.
I like Bob Evans, I think, better than Golden Corral.
But then
that's
also
no
early
way.
on,
No
it
way.
changed. But early on, the other thing, and Anastasia, when you and I went out to the first trip, I remember we had a really, really nice dinner at the Iron Gate Grill.
Yeah.
Remember? That was really nice. And the owner, I can't remember her name, but she was cute and she was very nice.
Really nice and bubbly, yeah.
Just such a good person, like good-spirited person. She seemed like she didn't fit in to Point Pleasant.
Yeah, I think she said that it was kind of a big deal for her to open that up because I think she said people didn't want her to open up the restaurant.
Yeah, I remember we had.
Why?
I think
don't remember.
It might have just been that she was an out. She just kind of like she was an outsider.
You mean like don't come on here changing things type of thing?
Kinda,
A
yeah.
little bit, yeah. I mean, do you not also remember when we were out there the first time? There was a bunch of people pissed off because they were opening up. Was it a Denny's?
It wasn't a Denny's. It was
It was like a chain. And there was
Bennigan's?
something like
Was it a
might have been
Bennigan?
It was Bennigan's. There was a bunch of like just old timey local people who were like, this is. It's like the gateway drug for for growth.
Don't try to gentrify.
Yeah.
Don't you fucking put a Bennigan's next to the Piggly Wiggly because that's, then people start hanging out and it's just bad for business. And there was a lot of people that were very old school and old-minded when we were first down there. And I think the Iron Gate Grill thing was part of that. Like, she was a great person and not that she wasn't accepted, but I just think she was just kind of like an outsider. She was like an outsider starting a business there. But I remember we had dinner and I remember she goes, look, you see that crack? And she knew all about the history of the building. And she was like, none of this was here. This is from the Silver Bridge Falling, the Iron Gate restaurant. There was like two parts. There was like a dance party club thing. And then there was like more of a fine dining restaurant.
We went
part.
to the dance party club part of it.
We did that too. But we also, when we were first on, we went to the fine dining thing.
Yeah,
and
you
we
and
had
I
a really
went
nice
to.
dinner.
Did we shoot one of the interviews there with like the lights out in the
Yeah.
background?
We shot the reporter,
Yeah.
Dave Payton, outside there.
Right.
But that was a good place. I remember having that meal there. I love to eat, and I remember meals a lot, and I definitely remember that meal. And anything else that you guys want to talk about with the production? Anything we forgot?
I'm sure there's. Sure they're going to be talking about a lot of things, but
I remember one thing. Last thing I remember we're filming. And again, just good memories. I remember we were filming somewhere, and we were with Justin, who was the youngest, just crazy. And I remember we drove by a hill, and he goes, "Pull over." I'm like, why? He's like, "I want to roll down that hill."
Oh my God, I remember that.
And we literally just stopped the van so he could get out
Oh.
and roll his ass down a big old hill.
We were coming back from the Mexican restaurant we had just eaten at. I don't remember what town we had traveled to, but it was a Mexican restaurant. He's like, pull over, yeah.
Pull over, like it's an
And I
emergency.
think, Neil, you did it too.
Yeah, you did. I have it on camera.
You did it too.
Yes, I remember that.
So I think
Boy, we were getting loopy.
now I'm gonna plug our movie on DVD, which I know now everything is streamed. Not many people buy DVDs anymore. I mean, maybe it depends on the part of the country you're in, but all of that stuff, that part, if I'm not mistaken, is in our behind the scenes on the DVD, the original DVD. So this is on this podcast. One of our episodes, we're gonna take the 50-minute version of the film and play it as a podcast, which was the version of the film that aired in Europe and aired here in domestically on some television networks. It was the shortened version, which is a good version. But to me, the best version of the film is the extended director's edition. It's the 2.5-hour version that you can see online. But if you want all of the extra stuff, there's commentaries, there's bonus stuff. It still only exists on the DVD, which we do have on our website. People can buy it. And it's a shameless plug, but it also isn't. Like, if you want the definitive best version of what we have, still the best way to get that is the DVD. It has all of that stuff on there. And I just remember the rolling down the hill thing is probably somewhere in the behind the scenes of the DVD.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God.
You got to bust out the DVD.
There's a lot in the behind the scenes, Neil.
There's something fun, too, about having a DVD. It's just a tangible thing. You hold it in your hands.
Yeah.
There's an artwork to it. I know vinyl and those things are coming back now, too, and making a comeback a little bit. And, there's part of me that's like, we shouldn't really even push the DVD anymore. But it lends itself to this subject matter, too. People that I think are diehard fans of the Mothman that like these things will probably relate to that and can connect to that.
It's also like you don't buy someone a rental. You don't buy somebody a streaming thing. Right.
There's no substance to
right.
it.
And so DVDs, as far as somebody who's into the mysteries or unexplained things or UFOs and things like that, like the Mothman, it's the perfect gift. No, but it's not really what I meant. But it's kind of like if you're going to, if you know somebody who's like that. Well, it's a gift. It's something, like you said, in your hand. You don't give digital stuff like that. You don't give a stream to you.
Well, if you do, it's weird.
Yeah.
It is weird.
I got you 5 streams, Stacey.
You can also, the thing is, you can also get the DVD and rip it. It's you can rip the DVD. So if you want it digital, you can kind of do that. But I just still, when everyone asks me, like, what's the best way to see it? I'm like, get the DVD. It's not that hard to still watch a DVD. It's possible. So going back, we wrap production. We go back to New York. We start the post-production process. Some of it was actually done in West Virginia, which I totally forgot about until Anastasia reminded me. But everything that people don't realize, talking about the process of that, everything we shot has to be ingested, transcoded, synced. I remember making a huge master paper edit, which is basically like you take you transcribe everything. So every interview, sometimes we spoke to someone for 2 hours. Every word they say gets typed out. So then we can look at it and try to piece together how they connect. They call these type of documentaries talking head documentaries, and you really have to decide what you're going to tell the audience through interview and what you're going to tell through voiceover. I definitely wanted to lean way more on the interview side because it's just more sincere. Hearing a person talk about what they saw or what they thought they saw or what they experienced is better than having some third-party narrator tell it. So I definitely lean on the side of always kind of trying to use the interviews whenever possible and then supporting it with some voiceover. And then the narrator, do you remember who narrated our movie?
I don't remember his name, but I remember his voice.
It was Richard Pate. Yeah. So Richard Pate, remember we had shot a film, a narrative film with Jake Cashl's film.
Yes.
And the police detective in the end, I remember we're filming that. I'm like, this guy's got a good voice. And so he eventually ended up being our narrator. And I think he did a great job. He had a voice that sounded like it could have been from out there, but wasn't so heavy-handed over the top with like a Southern accent.
Yeah, an authentic
And that was why
voice.
we picked him. Yeah. It sounded like someone from out there, but not in a cliche way. So everything fell into place, I think, pretty easily. Honestly, from an editing standpoint, I've worked a lot as an editor now over the years. And when I look back to this, like I don't remember struggling a lot with it. A lot of people, some people have said, oh, it is too long. But that was an intentional choice I made.
It's also in chapters. So if you don't want to hear about, cornstalk, you can go to the next chapter that talks about the bridge. Or
don't even get me started about that. That's my most annoying, I will say my most frustrating note that I've been.
Well, it's too long?
A lot of people will go, they get frustrated that they're like, what's Cornstalk even doing in the film? They don't understand the relevance, or they're like, we spend too much time on that. And to me, that blows my mind because of all of the scenarios. In terms of aliens or government conspiracy or toxic waste, seeping into the wildlife. Cornstalk was the one in terms of it being like the manifestation of a curse. It was the only
it all circles back to that
story that can be documented. Like in terms of he was a real person. He, there was no doubt that he was in a battle there, that he was murdered there, that he would so of all of the origin stories of what the manifestation of the Mothman could be, in a weird way, to me, that one has the most credence because it's a real person based on a real event with real, it's people argue over, did he actually curse the land or not? But, someone doesn't have to say, I curse this land to curse it. It's bad juju. You murder some guy in a town and then you go into some things we talked about with the Native American studies people that we interviewed and the anthropologists. Birds and Native American culture go hand in hand, totem poles and all those things. So to me, it's like that is one of the most fascinating, interesting potential backstories and ancillary kind of topics to the subject matter. And it's just, I find it so strange that people don't understand the connection of why we spent time on telling of who Cornstalk was and the relevance to the town.
Yeah, but unless you're actually in the town, I mean, my whole thing with Cornstalk is that it's not like something happened in the Upper West Side of Manhattan and then something happened in Chelsea. The Silver Bridge and where Cornstalk was is spitting distance. It's all right there concentrated in this small little area.
Right.
It's not like, oh, this is the story of California. This is the story of something that's like a quarter square mile.
Right, you can walk
also,
it. You can walk it.
Wasn't the courthouse, wasn't it right across the street from where the Silver Bridge used to be? Like right there.
Close.
And then his remains were originally at the courthouse. It blew up and then they moved his remains to the park.
Yes.
So
we left things out of the film.
It all circles back to Cornstalk.
Most of it does.
Right. It's like that scene in JFK where they're talking about when they're in New Orleans and it's all here and that corner and that corner. It's all right at the same bullseye in this little known town in West Virginia. Yeah. How do you have all of those things happen in the same small place?
Yeah. And like I said, to me, that's the one tangible thing that there is no was Cornstalk real? He absolutely was real. He was a real person and was murdered in the town. And there were other events, whether or not you want to call it a coincidence or not. But yes, his remains were used to be either at the courthouse or near the courthouse. And then the fucking thing explodes, blows up. Or someone blew it up. I don't remember the exact details, but there was an absolute tragedy that happened there. And then the bones are moved to a different resting place. And to me, that's so interesting. And I think maybe that's what people don't like about it. Maybe people don't like that it's grounded in some type of real history or reality. It's more fun to believe that Mothman came out of a UFO or is part of a government conspiracy. These are all, they're all different theories and everyone has the right to their opinion. But I just was always shocked that people leaned more towards a critical, questionable, and almost negative response to us spending time on Cornstalk in the film, and just kind of missing the point of why it's there. I mean, it's backstory, it's history, and that's the other thing. It also, if you're going to tell the history of Mothman, this is a film that is really not just about Mothman. It's a history of the town. And you can't tell the history of the town without getting into that. And they do cross over. That's the thing. It's not like it's completely, we didn't talk about the history of the riverboats in the town because it has nothing to do with Mothman. But if you're telling me that an Indian chief gets murdered in town and there's tons of questionable events surrounding his death and his remains, and you look at, again, the cultural connection of thunderbirds and totem poles and how birds are often seen in that culture, it's just so obvious. I just found it surprising throughout the years that certain audiences didn't even after we kind of spelled it out for them, still failed to understand the connection of why it exists in the film. If you're wondering, that's why it's there. So speaking of Cornstalk, back when we were cutting the film, I had named all of the hard drives different things. One was called the Silver Bridge, one was called Mothman, one was called Cornstalk. And I do remember, ironically or not, or coincidentally or not, the Cornstalk drive, without fail, would always have a problem. It would dismount. It would get corrupted. We had to clone it and back it up multiple times. But the Cornstalk hard drive was the only one of the few that just was a constant problem in the editing and just had issues. I think also we cut the film. I think the first thing we did was that we showed it to the townspeople just kind of for approval of what is your reaction to this? Hopefully you like this, before we started sending it out to any distributors or anything like that. And I remember it got a good feedback, right? No one had any problem. Everybody was really pretty happy with the film.
I don't remember this at all.
I don't either. Did we show it at the theater?
It's shown at it played at the Mothman Festival in the State Theater.
Oh, wait. Yes, it did play at the Mothman Festival. I think you guys were on stage. Yeah, and they asked questions.
Yeah, we had a Q&A.
And I don't think I was part of that, obviously.
You were hiding. Okay. You like to hide from these things. No, I remember us showing it to, some of the people that we had worked with, just to kind of get their stamp of approval. That's always a difficult thing, because if someone goes, well, I don't like it, too bad, I'm not changing it. It's more just, again, a courtesy thing, but everyone was happy with it.
Yeah, you feel a little naked in front of the world, when it's one thing about making a movie. Say you made a movie about a famous person. One thing showing it to an audience, another thing showing it to that famous person. What is their reaction? So this is about your town. Now we're going to show the town about your town and see. Yeah. And it makes you a lot of trepidation.
No one likes how they look on camera. No one likes how they sound. But I honestly, I don't remember anyone that we shot who was in it saying anything bad about it. I think they would have told us. I think they were all happy. I know, it went from, I don't know if you guys should do this, to, can you send us a bunch of copies? We've been handing them out, because I think they were happy with how we represented them. And again, without knowing, we kind of ended up being a part of their own history of the town and a part of the story of Mothman, which is why we're doing this. Just giving people the access to the raw interviews, with now many people who are no longer there. You kind of forget. You think time is stationary, right? When you think of that town in Mothman. You think of Carolyn Harris and the steakhouse, but those things are all gone now. She's gone. She's passed away. That landmark of a place where people would come in and get lunch and talk about Mothman and these stories, it's gone. Many of the subjects that we interviewed have passed away. They were kind of in their later years when we had interviewed them, and so you don't think about it then. But time goes by and now they're gone. People that have helped us, two people that worked on the audio, Alan Zapata and Bruce Hathaway, both people that we worked with for years, have both passed away now, which still blows my mind. Both did a great job on the film. I mean, Bruce, in the score that he wrote for the movie, I know he went above and beyond for it. I think the music in the film is great. Nowadays everyone just uses stock music, and that's a common thing. But we had a composer who wrote the music for the film. And it really kind of gave it its own life force and authenticity. So it's it's hard to think that those guys are gone, but we obviously don't forget them and we remember them. Talking about the Cornstalk hard drive crashing all the time, people love stories like that, and it's just, again, don't know why I was doing it, but it was. Some weird things did happen to us when we were out there. I know, not you, Neil, because you don't have a soul, but for us, there a couple strange things did happen. Do you remember, Anastasia? I can think of at least 2 things that happened out there that we were both involved with. Do you remember some strange things happening off camera?
Yeah. I remember we were staying at the hotel there, the Low Hotel. Is this one of the things that you remember?
Yeah.
We were staying at the Low Hotel, and I woke up in the middle of the night we had no windows in our hotel room because we were I think we were in like an older part of the building, but there were no windows. And I woke up.
Well, there was a window. Do you remember this?
But
there was a window that went nowhere.
But it led to the hallway.
It went to a hallway that was boarded up.
Yeah, so there were no windows to the outside.
No windows to the outside.
So when you shut the lights to go to sleep, it was like pitch black, no light at all. And I woke up in the middle of the night to a flashing light. It was like a flash of something. I don't know what it was, but it was a flash, and that's what woke me up.
No, I woke you up.
But when I woke up, it was like a flash of light. And you...
Yeah, so this was incredibly weird. And then I want to watch Neil's face when I tell him. Do you remember this at all?
When you had like a
do you remember what happened?
Episode? Yeah, when you were like exhausted.
No. So something weird happened. So we were staying in the Low Hotel, and the Low Hotel is a historical landmark. And it's ancient. I mean, it's supposedly haunted. And there used to be a slave's quarters, right?
Yeah. And that's where we were staying.
So let me tell it better. So we're staying at the Low Hotel, which is a historical landmark, and it's incredibly old. There's rumors of ghost stories, and people see things there all the time. We were staying in a room that had a window that kind of led to a staircase that went nowhere. Like when you went and looked out the window, it was just stairs leading down. It was boarded up, and it was just strange. Maybe it used to be a door, and they, instead of just putting a door there, they just boarded it off but put a window. So we were sleeping in that room, and I distinctly remember my dream. I was having a very vivid dream. I am not super religious, so this was a little unusual. There was a dream I was having. It was a first-person perspective dream, and there was a figure with its back to me, and there was a spotlight on it from above, and it looked like a wax figure, and I was coming closer to it, and I remember being scared in my dream that it was a scary thing, and it slowly turned around. And as this was happening, I was hearing a distinctive noise of a person being whipped, like a whip hitting flesh. It's just what it sounded like. It was very loud and very distinct. And the figure turned around, and as the figure turned around, it was Jesus. It was Jesus without a shirt on, just kind of your standard Jesus. But it looked like a wax figure, and this was the whole dream, just moving towards it, turning around, and looking like in pain, and just being whipped, and it scared the shit out of me. And I woke up, and what scared me is I woke up from my dream, and without a doubt, I know I was not still dreaming. I was still hearing the noise of the whipping in the room. I was hearing the whoosh, whoosh, and I thought maybe someone was lighting fireworks. It was coming from the window to the stairs, but there was no door there. So there couldn't have been, that's where the noise was coming from. And so, and I'm not talking like I woke up and I heard it one more time. Like I woke up and I heard it once, twice, 3 times. So I'm like, there's something coming out of that. And I shook Anastasia, who was sleeping next to me, to wake up, and because I wanted like validation. I wanted someone to hear, like, do you hear this noise? So I woke her up and I said, do you hear this? Do you hear this? Do you hear this? And I remember she woke up and she goes, yeah, I see it. And I'm like, what? And she goes, I see it. And I'm like, no, do you hear the noise of the whipping? And I remember you said no, that you didn't hear anything, but you saw flashes of light in the room.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything. I don't know what you're talking about, but I did see the flashes of light. It was like flash, 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 and then it just kind of all went black.
It was very strange.
So it was like bizarre.
What was strange about it was you were seeing something and I wasn't seeing anything, and I was hearing something and you weren't hearing anything. And I do remember the next day we were, leaving for the day, and we saw the hotel owner, and we said, oh, it was, he was like, did you sleep well or something like that? And we're like, oh, actually, no, and we told him what happened, and he just started laughing. He was like, he's like, you know what room you're staying in? And I'm like, no. He's like, that's the old slave quarters. He's like, that window used to be to the separate stairwell that the help used to have to use, separate from the other people staying in the I don't even know if did it used to be something other than a hotel, but it was just the idea that he was laughing. He's like, yeah, I put you guys in the old, was it the slave quarters?
It was
or
the
maid
slave. No, it
quarters?
was the slave quarters. It was the old slave quarters.
And
that's why there was stairwell, because that was the slave entrance, because they couldn't come from the front.
Yeah,
door.
they couldn't come to the front.
Yeah.
And I remember he was just laughing. He's like, yeah, people see things there all the time. So he was just thought it was normal. But that scared the shit out of me.
There was also another incident where we were all watching TV in I guess it was the living room of our suite or whatever we were staying in. And there was a mirror on the wall. And everyone was sitting down watching whatever we were watching. And I went to go to the bathroom and I passed the mirror. And then when I turned over and I saw a figure pass the mirror after me, but it wasn't you guys. And I just remember thinking, what the hell did I just see? But then I kind of said, okay, maybe I'm just seeing things. But I know for sure that I saw something pass the mirror after I passed the mirror. So that was something else that happened when we were there.
And nothing happened to you, right?
No. I slept with in the same room with Justin Massler.
You just slept with a schizophrenic.
Yeah, I would have welcomed whipping and ghosts.
Another thing that happened, and I don't remember honestly if we've ever talked about any of these stories, but again, in thinking back to the whole production and process, these things started to come back to me. Another strange thing that happened, just Anastasia and I remember it was towards the end of the trip, and we went down to the park to film some shots of the bridge, and we were filming the bridge, and literally out of nowhere, two people just appeared, and one of them was wearing all black, had a black cowboy hat type thing, and the other guy was also wearing black, but he was dressed in a more kind of button down modern way.
He was younger too.
He was younger. One guy was a little heavy set, the other guy was smaller and skinny. And I just remember someone going, now why in the world would somebody want to film a bridge? And I turned around and I was like, who the fuck are these people? And where did they come from? They literally appeared out of nowhere. And I remember I jokingly always kind of call them the modern day Men in Black, because they were wearing all black. They had asked us a lot of strange questions about what we were doing in town, why we were here. And I remember I got a really weird vibe from them. And they had told us where they were from and why they were here. And they were clearly lying. It made no sense. They didn't fit in. They were not part of the town. They were obviously outsiders. I don't even know where they came from.
But also, why were they there? Because we were at
we were at a
it
dead
was
end.
A dead end. If you keep going, you go into the river. We were there because we were filming the bridge. There was no reason for them to be there. They drove there, got out just to speak to us. Their car was parked further over. It wasn't they parked the car, walked to us, I'm assuming, because their car was a little further over, spoke to us and left. It's not like they looked around. They literally just came there to speak to us. It was so weird.
They were asking us why we were here, what we were doing, and I remember the first thing they said is, now why would anybody want to film a bridge? And it was just strange. The way they spoke was strange. They didn't fit in to the town. I remember they told us, I think they were from somewhere in Ohio, and they told us why they were in town. But then we checked it up later.
Didn't add up.
We Googled it and searched and they were lies.
Yeah.
They were lies, where they said they were from. And they were like, oh, well, we're just going back home and we'll be there in 20 minutes. And it was hours away. It was clearly lies. And it was just strange. It gave me a really weird feeling at the time. And I just remember thinking, these people are lying to us. I don't know why they're interested in what we're doing, but it was very much like a Men in Black story. And weirdos were, inquisitive as to what we were doing. And they did not seem normal.
Well,
Did you ever see them again?
No. They were asking about the Mothman statue too.
Yeah, they were playing dumb.
It was so
They're like, so what? What's this town all about? And then they were like just asking us loaded questions, and it made no sense why they were there. They appeared out of nowhere.
Yeah,
like they literally startled me. I was like, where did the
and
fuck
they
did
had
these
no
people
reason
come
to
from?
be in that spot at that time.
None, and they were dressed strange.
Yeah.
They were like two people that did not look like they would be friends.
No,
It was so strange.
no. One of them was like a 20-something-year-old, and the other guy was like maybe in his late 50s. But they weren't related. I think I even said, like, is he your son or something? Like, I might have even asked if they're father and son, and they laughed, but I don't think I ever got an answer.
No.
It was so weird.
They were weird. They were asking loaded questions, and they were dodgy when you asked them questions. And when you did ask them questions, they gave us answers that were clearly lies. That was so strange, and it made no sense. And talking about the TNT plant and the military base that was there, that was another big part of the Mothman story. I do remember, I don't know if you remember this, there was one person who came up to us and was talking to us, and he said he absolutely he would not be interviewed on camera, but that he worked at the military base, and that he said like things that went on there that were like more than like what people thought. And he was like, and he was. Do you remember that? There was someone who he was like, I absolutely will not be interviewed.
I don't remember the person. I remember the situation, the conversation, but I don't remember the person at all.
I don't remember what he looked like, but I do remember just another person coming up to us saying like off the record, like the military base that was here was more than what it seemed to be. Years after doing this, when you hear people talk about the Mothman and Mothman sightings, and they describe it, talk about it having no head, being a giant bird, which like sounds ridiculous. You're like, how does it have no head? And years after making this movie, I started to have like a memory, and I'm 100% positive that this is not like a false memory, that this is not a dream. I had like a memory unjarred out of my head from when I was like a kid, like maybe 10, 12 years old. I absolutely remember exactly where I was, being in my backyard alone. We had a big backyard growing up. I used to play in the backyard all the time out in the woods. I absolutely had an incident where I was playing in the back by this tree that I always kind of climb up, and I was always climbing trees as a kid. And I remember it started with, I heard the noise of like a whoosh, and it was like wings. And I turned and looked, and this gigantic fucking bird landed in the tree next to me. It's a bird. It looked like an owl, but it was massive, and it had no head. I swear to God, I know it's weird, and I probably sound crazy, but I absolutely have a distinctive memory as a child of having a gigantic brown bird. And it wasn't that it didn't have a head, it's like you couldn't see it. Like, when an owl puts its head on, it's a thing that it does. It landed next to me, sat there for a minute. I looked at it, and then it took off. Like, it was absolutely something that happened. You're both looking at me like I'm crazy. I don't remember. I don't think I've really told many people, but I know it happened, and I do remember it. So who knows? Maybe that was some type of like foretelling of my destiny in life to make the ultimate Mothman documentary. It happened. It's very vivid. All right. So early on in making the film, another thing I knew I wanted to do was to tell the movie in chapters, which is kind of ironic because back then, again, people sometimes will be like, oh, the movie's so long and it's kind of overly done. But now everything's overly done. And I don't think our film's overly done. I think it was appropriate. But now you look at like Netflix, they'll have an 8-part series for something that should have just been like a 60-minute documentary. So I think we can say that we pioneered the multi-part, multi-section documentary.
Well, let me ask you this question. The landscape of production and documentaries, especially on Netflix and streaming services, if you were to make it today, would you say, okay, this is going to be a 5-part documentary? Or would you still make it the one piece?
Yeah, I would probably expand upon it. I think that I liked the way that we broke down sections in terms of Cornstalk, the Wildlife Preserve, the Mothman. I think I would just stick with that formula, but I would make each one of those a full episode. Let's go through each section and just kind of talk about what we remember a little bit about maybe the making of it or what it took to put those parts together. So the film starts out with a prologue, which I don't think that was planned, but it just needed something to ease us into the film. I mean, the project having so many variables and so many different topics, it is a little bit difficult to kind of steer it in one direction. So we kind of thought starting it off with a little bit of a like easing into it. And then I do remember kind of the goal was to start slow and then hit you with like a little, an impact with the way that our title came on. And it was like, you think you're going to ease into this slower documentary and then no, there's a lot more to it. And it kind of speeds up and ramps up to our title. And the first section that we explore in the film was the curse of Chief Cornstalk. Some of this, or most of this, I think, was done in chronological order in terms of the events that played out. I think that's how we decided to segment the film. And so first one was the curse of Chief Cornstalk. When we talk about curse of Chief Cornstalk, what comes to mind for you guys in terms of like the production that we did? Do you remember the interviews?
Well, a reenactment of having the person dressed up as a Native American, as Cornstalk, and how good that looked and how much production value that brought. And it was just somebody, I don't know where you got him, but and then there was some sort of musket that was being used. And who was holding the musket? Do you remember?
I think they brought everything.
Oh, they brought all.
We didn't have anything, and they did their own like makeup because they're reenactment actors. So we didn't have to do anything. It was like amazing.
Yeah, they came ready. And we weren't planning on any of that. Someone just said, "Oh, hey, there's a guy who dresses up like Cornstalk. You want to film him?" We're like, "Yes." And
it was him and his wife and one other guy, and they did like the whole thing. It was awesome.
Right. She had like the Davy Crockett outfit type of thing, didn't she?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's amazing what 3 actors in period costumes, how far that goes.
Well, it's also how far it goes, meaning I don't know if you had an idea how you wanted to edit that once you had all the footage, but it was just like for whatever we shot, you used every last morsel of every shoot that we had to cut into that film. Yeah,
there was not a lot of footage that was left on the cutting room floor just because it wasn't planned so much. We went out there with not really much of a budget at all. And we didn't think we had the money for actors or locations or recreations. And these things just kind of kept coming up as, being offered to us. Would you like to shoot this person? Would you like to use this car? And so we took full advantage of everything. And again, a little goes a long way. And I look at, I like documentaries, and I look at our documentary where I think a little goes a long way. It's almost like a good book. When you read a book, a lot is dependent on the reader, where the information is there, but it's up to your mind to fill in the holes, the imagery, the sound effects, the time, the landscape, those things that sometimes a book doesn't provide. And so I think the documentary is similar, and at least that's something I remember I learned on this, where a little goes a long way. You don't need to film 60 revolutionary soldiers in a battle. You can film, works of art. You can film paintings. You can film, we filmed the etching of the battle on the one monument. You can film gravestones of soldiers that fought and died there. You can film 2 Native Americans walking through the woods, and it's still something visually interesting. And even though, the reality of it was there's probably hundreds of people in this fight, you just didn't need it. And so I definitely remember learning that. I remember we used the dolly a lot. Same thing, homemade dolly made out of 2x4s and PVC. And I also do remember we were filming on top of a mountain with the dolly on one of the later days. And I think it was Fox News heard that we were filming in town. Remember they came out and documented our filming. We made the news.
Yeah, I remember this.
God, I don't.
I remember.
Yeah, so we were on the news while we were out there for Fox, and I do remember it started to rain and a storm came off the mountain. of course, as soon as Fox News gets there, and I remember the woman being like, "Oh, how's it going?" And just making small talk. And behind me, I do remember stuff falling down and the dolly disintegrating and falling apart, like breaking, and of like while they're there filming.
Oh God!
And I remember going,
Whose house was that? I remember we were hiding because of the rain, hiding underneath like the top deck or something. Whose house was that?
And I think it was a friend or relative of Denny Bellamy.
Was that the place we did go to? One woman, an older woman, had a piece of property there with a house, and we were going there, and she was old time West Virginia.
She had like short hair, very short hair.
She might have, but I just remember we knocked on the door and she answered and said, "Oh, good thing you guys called ahead when you were coming here because we shoot trespassers."
Oh yeah,
that was not.
Was that her?
That was not her.
No, I do remember that happening. Someone said that. Yeah, someone basically.
And she was as serious as a heart attack when she said that.
I don't remember that at all. I do remember Denny's sister, but I don't think that was her.
Again, it's Appalachia, and people are protective of their property. I remember years later going back out to the same region for a project. I was talking with like a consultant, and he had said, "Oh, this was a different, more rougher, tougher part of Appalachia for this other thing." And I remember someone saying to me, like, "Here, you should watch these 2 films before you come out here so you know what you're getting into in terms of people." And one film, it was called Long Journey Home, which was about a girl who leaves Appalachia and comes back home to see her family.
It's a documentary?
Documentary. And then the second film was called Stranger with a Camera. And that was about, if I'm not mistaken, it was a person from New York or city, a city area, urban area, I think it was New York, who decided to go into Appalachia to document the people. And they killed him while he was making the movie.
You didn't tell me about that.
No, but I remember thinking like, oh, well, this is a passive aggressive warning.
Yeah,
getting that from the consultant. Now again, it wasn't for the Mothman project, but something else. But it just tells you of the kind of people that are out there. Just a little bit of anything goes. They're in parts of the country where if you live on the side of a mountain and you call 911, it's going to take some time for someone to get there. But
meaning an hour or more.
Yeah. So not
which is why they all have guns and are against gun control because
right. It's a necessity.
Right.
That was one of the most fun parts of the documentary for me. Getting to film those recreation actors, and again, I just like the fact that it touched on more traditional history. And
but I remember the guy who was telling us about the interview. But the thing that struck me about it, because here's this guy who, Cornstalk, and this kind of noble, the noble Indian type of story, and kind of being a victim where he was murdered. I think his son was murdered as well.
Yeah, they were locked up.
But yeah,
and then murdered in prison.
Yeah,
in a jail cell,
beaten with a hammer to death, and one of them tried to escape out of the chimney kind of thing. And
what a good memory you have.
But what I do remember was the guy who killed them, this American who came and beat them with the hammer. His family was just slaughtered by Cornstalk and Cornstalk's people.
Yeah.
And he was coming back for some payback. That's why he was doing that. Right. And so this whole idea of Cornstalk was this, the noble idea and all this. No, these people were killers. I mean, they were just a bunch of people killing each other. I mean, and you had to, at least they thought, take care of it themselves.
The next section was McClintock Wildlife Preserve, which it's funny. Everybody calls that area the TNT plant, but I didn't want to call it that. I don't know why.
Oh, I don't know why either. I thought you always did.
No, I didn't want to call it the TNT plant.
Well, you called it the name that it actually was. Everyone called it the TNT plant because they manufacture TNT there, but it was actually called the McClintock Wildlife Preserve.
Well, you know what? What I think was more interesting about that area was when you call it the TNT plant, you automatically think of explosives and bombs and government type of presence. To me, the more correlating relationship between the area and the story of the Mothman was the fact that it was a wildlife preserve, that there were large exotic animals there, giant birds, sandhill cranes, and, big owls, things like that. So I just wanted a constant reminder of like why it's there. And to me, the relevance is more of the wildlife potentially being mutated there from the chemicals of the plant. And so calling it the McClintock Wildlife Preserve was definitely kind of an intentional reminder that, like, let's not forget, this is another potential origin of what the thing could have been.
It's also current. They currently call it that. It used to be a TNT plant.
Yeah.
So like you're calling it by the current name of it.
Yeah, but I'm saying it was a choice. I remember filming out there. It was creepy. You had those vacant buildings. That like old cement. It has like a very distinctive smell. I remember my grandparents had a dairy farm when I was growing up, and I remember the smell of some of the buildings, and that they were always so cold without refrigeration. They were just cold by the structure of them. It reminded me a lot about that. We filmed out there. We had access to pretty much everywhere. I mean, were you guys worried at all? I'm not gonna lie. I was a little concerned because the EPA, there was a major EPA cleanup of that area. I mean, it was a toxic spill site. So I also remember thinking, I really don't want to spend too much time out here because I don't want a third arm.
That's also something you didn't tell me.
You knew this.
Well, during the interview, I forget who it was that we were interviewing, but he's like, it'll never be like clean.
Right, right.
I remember the interview. Yeah. Who was that?
It was a guy you mean the guy from the government?
No, I think he used to work at the.
Yeah, he worked there.
Mustache?
He's a local.
There.
Like
and he said it'll never be.
Big beard.
It'll never be like clean. Like he said that.
Right. It's tainted and it always will be. There's only so much I guess you can do. But
the guy who caught he caught a fish, remember? We
he
talked
had like
about the fish he caught.
the mustache,
Yeah.
the handlebar
He caught
mustache.
like a two-headed fish or something.
I think that was him,
that's
yeah.
what we interviewed him for that. Yeah, I mean, his son was the co-author of the Mothman book that Jeff put out. But the reason why we interviewed him is he had hunted and fished in that area for a long time, and he had caught like a mutated fish. So our whole point was like, there's mutated fish out there. What are the odds that there might be a mutated bird as well?
Right. Well, I just remember walking through those cement igloos is really what they were. And they were dank and they were dark. And so you walk in and you're like, is there a hibernating something in here? Like I can't even tell. And then I thought, we better keep an eye on the time because if it gets dark out here, you ain't seeing nothing and you're not going to be able to get back.
But the Frick brothers were with us, so we were
and so
we were safe.
they bolted it back into shape. The Frick brothers.
I remember another memory I have of that area is we filmed some of the recreations with the car at night for the Mothman sightings. And that was our last day. And I remember we had rented a generator and I had to go all the way back to the TNT area to get the generator on my own.
That we left there in the darkness?
We left it in the darkness. We were using it to light everything.
Oh.
So everything was broken down. We moved everything back. We went back to the hotel. And then someone had to go back into the freaking darkness to get the generator. And so I went and I just remember like I was scared because it's pitch black.
Pitch black. Like nothing.
And I remember Justin laughing at me for being scared. I'm like, fuck you. I can't see shit out here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is also an interesting thing when you read about it in a book, like I had done for the John Keel book. And then when you actually go there, it's just different. You have something in your mind. And you go there and you see like a landscape, even when it's half fallen down and dilapidated, you can kind of go like, all right, well, it makes sense. And it's much bigger than I think you realize. Like it is a lot of property, like a lot. You can get lost out there for days. There's swamps and just, again, lots of wildlife, lots of birds, a big area of property that it also had kind of like a negative vibe. Like most of the town I felt safe and fine in, but out there it just felt like bad energy out there.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I thought it felt bad energy too. But I mean, when I go into the woods, just because I'm not used to the woods, I get nervous. So I don't know if it was just because I'm from the city or if it actually had
Stacey likes the great indoors.
Yes, I do.
No one had ever taken the time to actually interview anybody from the Army Corps of Engineers or from the EPA or anyone from that standpoint. And I think we were the first film to track those leads down and talk to someone from the Army and talk to someone from like that military branch perspective of that. Because again, some of these things are speculative, but Cornstalk and the TNT plant and the McClintock area, like those are tangible things. There's no denying that they existed, that they were a part of the story. It's a real thing. If whether or not it got exaggerated is another. But it just made sense to go try to track people down and interview them. And I was honestly surprised that a lot of these people were very open and willing to talk to us because, again, back then, talking about a Mothman, it was still fairly taboo. People, it was a sensitive subject. It wasn't as mainstream as it was today. All right, next section in the film was the Mothman. It's obviously the heart and soul of the film. It's the core of the film. It's probably, it is the longest section of the film. And that was a little difficult to navigate because you try to figure out, how much of the story do you tell? A lot of people really get obsessed in the idea that Mothman is bigger than Point Pleasant, that, there's been sightings in other cities and areas and other countries. And I personally didn't want to get too deep into that. I really wanted to keep the story contained to Point Pleasant. My gut instinct just always told me that like whatever that story was its own story. I just didn't feel like the things that were spotted other places was the same, if that makes sense. Like you have all these Bigfoot sightings, I think, across the country in different parks and stuff, and everyone kind of, I think, unanimously believes like, oh, these are all the same creature. I just never felt like the other incidents and stories of like a flying entity, like it looked like the Jersey Devil, which we do cover in the film, just so there's some understanding that like Mothman is not the first time something aerial phenomenon, creature, mysterious being has been spotted. But I didn't want to be like, look, it's the same thing. And I think it comes across like that in the film. I never thought it was like the same monster.
No, I don't think so either. But I think the more popular the Mothman gets, the more people who spot something that they can't explain or that has some kind of mysterious element to it, they might automatically, say, oh, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, Mothman.
Yeah, associate it.
Right. So there's going to be more chances of people saying that they spotted it because of how popular it is. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's been even...
And that's your fault.
Well, I'm glad I contribute to society. There's even been... I'm not up on them, surprisingly enough. That's the other thing. Some people have sent me emails or even called me over the years to like, I think they think I'm like actively working on the Mothman 24/7, which God. I'm just not. Mm-hmm. It was a project that kind of came and went and moved on to other things. But, there's been other sightings. Like there was, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there was a fairly substantial Mothman sighting in Chicago in like the last 5 years.
In the city of Chicago.
Where people were reporting seeing a flying person. Again, to me, the Point Pleasant story was always like unique and organic and singular. I think you can compare it to other similar things, but I think whatever happened there was its own story, was its own thing, and that's why we didn't go too deep into comparable stories. We touch on it loosely just to set the groundwork that this wasn't the first and only time a winged creature had been spotted. But it was not to say definitively like what it was. I don't know if you remember in the film, we kind of talk about pterosaur sightings, which is an interesting thing in itself, just people spotting like what they describe as what can only be explained as like a dinosaur or like a prehistoric bird that's extinct or just something out of the ordinary. But still, to me, like none of those things seem to really relate. When you hear the eyewitnesses of what people said the Mothman looked like, it doesn't really explain the red eyes or the glowing eyes or like the kind of the science fiction nature of it. Closest thing I think would be the sandhill crane, which already has red coloring around the eyes. So the idea of it being some type of mutated bird, starts to kind of dip into a more plausible thing because it already has the foundation of what people were seeing. Any other thoughts on the Mothman section? And I mean, we did shoot a good amount of recreation for that. I do remember we didn't want to be really specific in terms of like a CGI, create a monster and be like, here's the Mothman. We purposely kept it vague. We didn't have a costume. There wasn't like makeup.
There was a lot of shadows. There was a lot of inference of something. There was a lot of reaction shots where you saw, frightened people looking into the distance type of thing.
I mean, there's also no definitive description of the Mothman. It's like, okay, this person saw someone who was like 6 feet tall. This person saw red eyes, but the first person might not necessarily have seen the red eyes. Like, it's just like, okay, we saw this, this, and this, but there's no there's no photographs of it.
Right. It's like an amalgam of.
Right. The closest thing we had was the original drawing that the people took. We also did one cool thing that our film did that I don't think anyone else has, is we were able to track down someone who actually worked at the newspaper where all of these reports were coming in. It wasn't Mary Hyre, the person who's in the John Keel book, which is she's been made like this famous icon because she had passed away by the time we made the film. But her boss, her head editor, we did interview, and that was kind of like an exclusive, if you want to say. No one had really found that person, but we did, and we spoke to him. And, he had an interesting perspective. He distinctly remembered the first case, the like Scarberry case, they call it, coming into tell the story and the police report and all that.
Was this the person that talks about the lipless woman?
I believe
Who
so.
is that?
Yes. No, he was talking about specific cases that were being reported, and that was one that he remembered about that.
The lipless woman.
Right, there was people being abducted, and they were describing the extraterrestrials that they were seeing, and it's very detailed and very specific. And like a kind of a true journalist reporter, he wasn't like slandering these people. He was just telling us what he remembered people coming in and saying. He didn't have an opinion. He just repeated the facts of the stories that he remembered. But that was a unique interview. And then we'll get into this later, but Myrtle Partridge was probably my favorite interview that we did. And he was one of the first eyewitnesses of the Mothman. And the things that he saw outside of his house, that his dog had been killed. Remember, that was the guy whose dog had been allegedly killed by the Mothman, and he had that whole episode.
He wrote a song, and it was like a Christmas anniversary song or something like that. And he wrote it down, like with all the lyrics, and he gave me a cassette of which I've never heard.
Oh, we're going to play this.
I have it.
You got to give that
I still
to me.
have it.
We'll play it here.
And he's like, this is my only copy. Like, I have to get it back. I'm like, you bitch. Like, I didn't want it. But he thought like I was big in the music scene or,
You didn't give it back to him?
No, I mean, I
when was he going to see him?
I don't know.
I just don't care that much. So
but he was a nice man.
He was a very nice man, but it was
and
just
I liked his wife. She was really cool.
It was never like, the thing is, I never thought about it until I saw it in all this old stuff, office materials that I have.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh shit. But I've never thrown it out. I've always had it.
You should mail it back to his family.
No, we're going to get it. We're going to put it on the episode.
I'm going to put it on the episode if I can find it.
Yeah, we're going to put it on the episode. After Mothman, we went into we had a section about completely dedicated to unidentified flying objects, which is another thing that I think kind of like almost gets forgotten in the Mothman story is that, outside of all of these Mothman sightings, there were even prior to the Mothman being spotted, this area was a huge hub for UFO sightings. And there were countless stories that we could have done an entire documentary on the UFO sightings in this area, which I found interesting. Specifically, I remember there were descriptions of people, again, you think it's like back in the 1960s, and there were people going, well, it looked like a giant ice cream cone in the sky, and just the association of what people would try to explain the visual makeup of these things, I think is interesting. And there were so many of them, and that's a fun section too. same thing in that section. We had worked with longtime collaborator, VFX artist Vincent McTiernan, and I just remember, having the discussions with him about the UFOs. We didn't want to get too specific. We didn't want to get too mechanical. We did a little bit, but like a lot of it, we wanted to kind of keep it very interpretational and lights and colors and objects that really, even if you're trying to describe them, it's not easy to do. That was the whole point. I'm just reminded how much is in this story. You think it's just the Mothman, but it's really not. It goes way beyond that. One of the most interesting stories I also thought was the story of Indrid Cold and Woodrow Derenberger. Do you guys remember that part of the film? And that story went up to Parkersburg, West Virginia, kind of a more city landscape to interview a few people about that specific case. But that was in the same time these stories were going on, just a few miles, I think, north, you have kind of a wild story of a guy who's a well-respected person in his community, who just starts telling people that he's having full-on abductions and conversations with aliens. And he's got names for them. He's got dates. He's got times. It's very chronicled. And it's equally just bizarre. Do you remember shooting that stuff? And that's where we had used Todd from the museum to portray Woodrow Derenberger in the recreation.
Yeah, I remember that. We shot in the hotel. The interviews, we shot them in the hotel, didn't we?
Yeah, there was a nice hotel in Parkersburg that we shot. We also shot in some hilltop in West Virginia, him looking out at these UFOs, because the whole idea was that he was having continual communication with aliens. And remember, we had also, at the time, it was hard to get this, but we had gotten access to like his tape recordings from the actual person.
Yeah. Weren't you in contact with the daughter for a while?
Yeah, I had built a decent relationship with his daughter, who was, a little nervous and skeptical at the time to help and contribute with this stuff because, again, it's controversial. People accused her dad of being crazy and, making these things up. Fascinating thing. Two things I remember about the Indrid Cold story is, one, it sounds sensational and it sounds crazy and it's like so quote unquote ridiculous. But he was interviewed by the Air Force and by NASA to where, they took him serious enough that they brought him down to Florida and took his claim seriously and investigated it. So that was always interesting to me that the United States government got involved with his case to the point where, they're interviewing him. Second thing I remember about the Indrid Cold case that was weird, again, I'm going to sound like a crackpot, but so at some point his daughter had given me like his personal diary or his personal manuscript and just his writings. And there were things in there that were, there was some of that I think in the John Keel book, but not everything. And so this was after the film was made, so I didn't put it in the film or didn't include some of this stuff. But in his writings were very specific, almost like a how-to talk to these extraterrestrials and communicate with them, how he would almost get in a meditative state to speak to them. And, I'm reading this and I'm kind of going like, oh man, there's no way that this is real. But at the same time, trying to give it an honest look. And there was something in there that I remember was very specific about like how to get your mind in a proper state to communicate with these specific aliens and what to do and how it's going to feel. And then if it's working, you're going to start to feel like a very specific tingling sensation, like between your nose and your forehead. And you're going to like feel it. And that's how it's working. And so I'm like, fuck it. I'm going to try it. So I'm reading the manuscript. And I'm like, well, I'm going to try it. So I do what he says to do. And I shit you not, like, again, it could just be the mind fucking with you, but I started to feel the sensation. And I was like, fuck this. I'm done. Bye. Someone else could do this shit. I'm not doing this. And I just, I wasn't that interested in talking with aliens.
Oh, it'd be interested to revisit that whole process to see if it would do the same thing today. If you don't have to be worried about talking to aliens, but just to be able to get into a meditative state.
I'm not going to say it didn't work. And, but I was like, yeah, this is too close to home. This is just too much. And I abandoned it. And And I don't know if I still have the actual manuscript. But all right, let's move on to the Silver Bridge. Probably the most difficult section to navigate when making the film because, you can talk about weird monster sightings and myths and legends and curses, but there's no denying that the Silver Bridge collapsed and people died on it. Many people died on it. Most people we interviewed, with the town being fairly small, everyone knew someone who died on the bridge. And so I just remember being really cautious with that and careful and not wanting to upset people. It's really difficult when you're interviewing someone to go like, oh, tell me about this, science fiction flying monster that you saw in town. And then like, next question, tell me about your aunt who died on the Silver Bridge. It's not an easy thing to do.
So I did think that you handled that a lot better than I thought you were going to handle it. There were a couple of interviews, one in particular where the person you were interviewing was crying and you were young and I didn't think you were going to be able to handle it properly. And you handled it very well where you like cut and let her have her moment and then came back. So I thought that was very out of character for you.
What does that even mean? I know exactly what you're talking about. And we can specifically get into that person when we get to her episode. But I will give myself some credit in that, eventually and after all this stuff, I ended up going to do other shows, a lot of reality shows, news network things, to where you're taught to push things and you're taught to get the worst out of people and you're taught to get the story and to get the drama. And so early on, like with this film, it's my movie and I get to do what I want with it. And I wasn't going to do that to this person. Her husband and children died on the bridge. And she told me before we did the interview, I probably don't want to talk about this. And I said, that's fine. I said, would you mind if we try? And if it doesn't, if you get upset, then we'll just pass. And so we did. And she got upset right away where she couldn't compose herself. We saved it for the last part of the interview. And I just remember thinking, at that time I was young and this was our first project like this, but I had still worked on other shows and other things. So I had been trained and taught. I remember I could hear the network's voice in my head. This is where you should really push, get her on camera, get her to cry, get her to talk about these things, expose her. It's for the good of the film and not have any respect or care for her as a person. This happens all the time in film and television, especially in reality shows. You're trying to get the worst out of people to make quote unquote good television. And I just didn't care enough. Like I did care. I cared more about this person as a human being than I did to maybe quote unquote make my movie better. It was the same thing with Linda Scarberry. People asked me all the time, why didn't you interview Linda Scarberry? Why didn't you interview her? She was in her later years in life and she was a key eyewitness for the Mothman. And I had conversations through another person with her about trying to do this and she wasn't comfortable doing it. She didn't want to do it. She was nervous. And she just didn't want to do it. And I wasn't going to push someone and force someone to do something that they didn't want to do. I remember the interview you're talking about. Again, we'll talk about it in more detail when we get to her episode, but I just felt like, at the end of the day, you're a producer, but you're also a person. I'm not going to try to force someone to talk about something they're not comfortable talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I've had to do that. Not with her only, but I've had to do that with other things. Now you're talking about an event that happened at the time we interviewed her 40 years beforehand. And it was still fresh. It was still as fresh as it happened that week. And my own experience is I've been in that situation where it was after 9/11, we were interviewing teenagers of a man who died on September the 13th. We were interviewing them in their home, and it was really uncomfortable. It was really like this dichotomy of, oh, I'm getting really exclusive content here that no one else is, and it feels like I'm filming inside of a funeral home, and I'm really invading this person's area of grief that I really should leave alone, especially now when it's so fresh. But I've interviewed people who've had to discuss things that they saw in the war that would curl your toes. This poor girl, I remember, she wasn't a girl, she was a girl then. She was a teenager, in World War II, but she talked about the day that she watched her town in the distance burn for 3 weeks, and it rained ash. The sky was black, the rooftops was black, the cornfields were black, the trees were black for weeks. And she's telling me this, and I knew this person, and when you suddenly get into that intimate detail of something like that, it really shudders you. And so when we were interviewing her in the movie, and she was talking about the worst thing that can happen to you.
It's the worst thing.
The worst thing that you can imagine happen. Right.
Tell me about the day that ruined your life.
Right. And look into the camera. So it's like
and sit up and speak loudly.
Yeah, but you prepped us too. You prepped us for that moment too, because you told us what you were going to ask. And again, like you said, we waited to the end of the interview, because if we started with that, there would be no interview.
Right.
And you thought that it was really like so immediate. As soon as the question, it was like a switch.
Immediate breakdown.
Just a breakdown. She couldn't even get the words out. I can't talk about that.
Right.
She couldn't even say it.
Tears.
Right. It was just, it's over. And you feel like, okay, I didn't mean to make you upset. We're not trying to invade your space. We're just trying to tell a story.
Well, there's something dirty about watching that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and just not giving a shit. And also, again, how many things have we worked on since where, I've been forced in reality shows to ask people the most inappropriate, horrible, rotten things that come from above, that come from network executives and people that they just don't care. They don't give a shit. They don't look at these people as people. To them, they're just actors in their movie, but they're not. It's a reality show or it's a news broadcast. They don't care. Mm-hmm. And so this was, I think this was early, or this might have been our second interview. I know on the log, it's our second tape. So it's probably our second interview. And so that was the other thing, we've been telling all these people, we're coming to town. You can trust us. We're not just going to be in and out. We're not just going to be someone who comes in, makes a movie, leaves and never comes back. We're looking to build relationships. You can't tell all those people those things and then rip their heart out on camera on day 2 and not think that this person's going to go say, oh, hey, you have an interview with them on Thursday? Well, I did my interview Tuesday. And they drilled me until I cried on camera. You're not going to set yourself up for good future interviews in a town like this where everybody knows everybody if you're just not sincere. So, we had attempted it, we tried it, but it wasn't worth having us get a bad reputation right off the bat, because it would have taken away more interviews from us, I think. So
yeah, I kind of have to, and this is the dichotomy there. Like when you're filming that, and she's like, I don't want to film anymore, or somebody says something like that, you, as a cameraman, you kind of look away as if you're not filming anymore, when of course the camera's still running. You just let it run. And whatever happens in front of that, whether she walks away or gets up or cries or composes herself or whatever happens, you have it. And so the filmmaker's going to do whatever they want with it. But that's another thing where you're like, if you had a better sense, you would shut it off. But you have this kind of voice in your head there going, this is what I'm here for. I'm supposed to be documenting this stuff.
Yeah, you can always leave it out.
But that's what the Silver Bridge thing is in a whole, because when you talk about Cornstalk, yeah, you can talk about the reality and the death and the murder and whatever, but it had happened hundreds of years ago. There's a lot of times passed. When you're talking about the Mothman, you're talking about mysterious stuff, things that you still are trying to prove. You're still trying to look for evidence to validate. This is a horrible, tragic event that happened right there where the bridge was. You can name the people who died. You can describe the carnage of cars floating and bodies having to be recovered and children getting killed right before Christmas as the packages are floating on the water from Christmas with their wrapping still on it. It's just like, that's when shit gets real. And that's why the Silver Bridge, when you talk about the design of it, the flaws and why it collapsed and all that, That's when you're getting into the nitty gritty of a real poignant story to me.
Yeah, it was the worst bridge disaster in the United States history. And the other thing, going back to like the emotional, like why not, provoke more emotion and get that on camera? To me, that's not the kind of movie we're making. We were not making an emotional film. I was trying to make something where it was facts. I literally looked at it as like an investigation, almost like a detective. I just wanted facts. And it just wasn't that important to get someone to be so upset. I mean, if you don't know that people are upset that, there was a disaster in their town and a bunch of people died, if you need someone crying on camera to convey that to you, then that's not, you're not the audience that we want. This was more about just getting facts and gathering facts in a very journalistic detective type way. And it's funny, this again is what, 18 years ago? You look at what journalism has turned into now, and it's all opinion. There is no unbiased, I'm just here to report the facts. I'm just here to it's now all, let's make everybody cry on camera. Let's get everybody upset. Let's get that viral moment. Let's get that, shareable social media reel. Who cares what the story is? We just want to see this person break down. We want to see everybody at their worst. And it's a huge problem in today and in today's media.
Yeah. I remember shooting a lot of that establishing stuff, a lot of bridge filming, but I remember one morning, it was really early morning, it was cold and it was raining. And I think I was on the front of the boat. Do you remember that?
Oh, when Jack brought you out on his boat.
I completely forgot that we did that.
You guys,
wow.
Yeah.
And I remember because it was painfully cold and wet, and I'm out there with literally out in the bow, and you guys are inside the boat, like sipping hot coffee.
I wasn't there. I was sleeping.
Right. And it was in
the haunted sleep.
It was It was so cold and so wet and so windy, and I was just kind of like my hands. I was holding the camera. I couldn't even hold it anymore because my hands were just so bad. And but we got some good shots of the bridge going underneath it and all that.
Not of that bridge, of the other bridge.
No, right, but of bridges to be able to. That's what it was, because there wasn't a reenactment of that. It wasn't like, okay, the bridge fell, or you didn't film fake packages floating on the water. It was a lot of suggestion.
Yeah, camera shakes. I mean, that's the thing. You just work with what you have. None of that was like preconceived or intentional. You just go, all right, what is there to film about the bridge? There's models. There's other bridges. There's cars. You tell it with fragments. And I actually think it just becomes more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Let the imagination of the audience.
I think the River Museum helped a lot with the Silver Bridge section of the documentary, just because they had the model of the bridge and they had all this other information about like the reports after the accident and stuff like that. So I think the River Museum helped a lot.
Yeah, they did. They gave us a lot of archival photos. And the other thing I do remember with the bridge, the way we handle it in post was we made sure there was a lot of sound design. So a lot of, what you didn't get as an audience from a visual perspective, we filled in with audio. So just rumbles and low frequency sounds, booms, cars, screeching, things like that to help tell the story. Again, this was like a good project that I learned a lot on as a person, as a filmmaker, of how to do something with not a lot. And it is, you look back, it's quite amazing what we did with 4 people, no budget, and, a decent idea.
It just feels funny that I'm almost hesitant to tell everybody. You're usually trying to build it up as far as what the budget was and what the crew did and how much we put into it. But it's almost like you're almost halfway embarrassed to be like, yeah, it was just us.
Yeah, there was no glamorous nothing, but it was still
like I'm one of the men in black. We filmed Your Eye. Yeah, Justin's another man in black.
Yeah.
The keyhole was our hotel. Those kinds of things. It's just
no sets, no nothing.
No, that was Justin running by in the shadow of a house.
Yeah, remember, because we were filming the Merle Partridge scene, and we're like, hey, somebody just throw a blanket over you and just run past there, and just cast a shadow of like a thing.
Yeah.
And again, it was
and it's fun. Spooky. It's a spooky shot.
Yeah, it worked. And then we added a little bit of effects later, and now some of it's dated now. It is funny, some of the reviews I see currently, people it's a little dated. It's like, we don't have AI, CGI, real engine. This was, at the time, it was pretty good. I remember with the UFO scene, we shot aerial shots over a power plant. And we said, why don't we just put some real subtle like orbs there, and we'll put shadows on them, like they're there for real. And we'll have them move in between things, like behind a telephone pole, but in front of the power plant, just enough to make people go, hey, that looks pretty real. Real in the sense that like it wasn't overly done. It wasn't Independence Day. It wasn't a giant wobbly saucer. And years later, that clip, I don't know if you know this, but years later, that clip started popping up on YouTube. People thought it was real, like an archive, like was a real amateur video of UFOs. Mm-hmm. And it got, thousands and thousands of hits. People not realizing it was just from our film.
And arguing with each other. And like, no, look at the shadows and look at this. It's absolutely real because. And it's really such an advantageous position to be in when you know what the genesis of that shot is.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, that's Vinny.
I made we made that. But that was the whole point, was to, we don't have a lot to work with, so let's keep it simple. But it was effective. All right, and then the movie wraps up with like a nice closure section. And one thing that we did as a technique, we knew the movie was going to be called Eyes of the Mothman. And so every interview we did, as we were kind of prepping the subject, we always shot close-ups of their eyes. And so that was a creative choice, but it also just helped so much in the editing later, because you don't realize, but anytime you want to cut somebody's sentence short or blend it with another one just for better storytelling, you could always cut to that close-up. And it's something that I took with me projects after that, getting that cutaway of the eyes, because it was just a great safety net device as an editor to be able to use that. And you don't realize that you're actually, you're taking minute 5 of the interview with minute 20 and putting it together. And people will see that now with this podcast. You're going to hear the unscripted, unedited interviews, and then you're going to see maybe how they were utilized in the film. And, that's just part of the process, that there's creative liberties taken. It's not about skewing facts, but it's about better storytelling. But that's a device that we came up with that I thought worked really well. And in our closing section, I just remember we end it with all those eyes of the people, and then you finally see the Mothman's eyes, and then we just kind of go out.
Is it widescreen?
Yeah, it's 16:9. Yeah, we were shooting on
natively 16:9.
Yeah, so at the time,
it was an
Panasonic
SDX 900.
Yeah, Panasonic. Yeah, and it was DVC Pro 50 tape stock, which gave you a anamorphic 16:9. And this is something that later on drove me nuts because I couldn't remember. But at the time, it was 2997 frames per second with a 2398 aesthetic look.
Yeah.
So at the time, most television was being played at 29.97 seconds. Every second of video was 29.97 frames. Later on, now the standards have changed to be 23.98. In the years after, it became obsolete quickly. But yeah, we gave it that nice look.
Yeah, I think you can pull out your iPhone now and get 4 times as much resolution as you can. I mean, we probably, at the budget that we had, we probably would have shot this with an iPhone at the time.
No, I would never shoot anything with a fucking iPhone.
You can.
I have no interest in that.
But you can.
You can. Doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
I don't like it at all.
There's a lot of things you can do now.
I'd be an advocate for the iPhone.
Oh, God. Please don't.
You see the commercials now. They shoot the commercials with it.
I'd rather shoot on a 5D DSLR with a prime lens still over an iPhone. I just don't like it. I don't want my creative, sophisticated device to be the same thing that I send nudes with.
I would like only one of those things to be true as well.
It's just crossing lines I don't want to cross. All right, so we're pretty much at the end here of our look back at the making of Eyes of the Mothman, the film. And I just want to reiterate, what the rest of this podcast is about. It's pretty simple. The future episodes, we're going to kind of tee up and close them out briefly, but it's really just about the unedited, unscripted, unfiltered, raw interviews that we conducted in the field, which have now kind of become a historical record and just an account of these things of eyewitnesses and experts, many of which who are no longer here. And we just thought, it's a nice way to just put that information out there for anyone who's, like I was years ago, obsessed with this story and didn't have much content. There's more, I would say, creative content out there now about this, but there's not a lot of journalistic type of material. I mean, the thing is, there's just no people out there. Like if you want to interview someone now, you're interviewing like the son of a witness, or like we had some pretty good access, and so
there's nothing out there besides this that treats it with the same. It's always trying to be a ghost story. It's always trying to be sensationalistic. It's always trying to be, Bigfoot. That's what they always try to do. There was nobody talking about to government officials. There was nobody talking to scientists. There was nobody else talking to experts, unless being a witness is an expert. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, we're not like hunting the Mothman. Like there's all these other things that are out there, like hunting Bigfoot and like hunting this, hunting that. We're not hunting the Mothman. We're going about it in a completely journalistic way. Like we're talking to experts about it. They're giving their opinion on it, completely educated opinions on it. We're talking to some eyewitnesses, close relatives of the eyewitnesses. Like we're not saying we're going to find Mothman. We're just stating the facts and having people come up with their own, conclusions about it.
That's the thing too. Everyone always wants to know, like, all right, so you made the movie, you did all this work. You're like, what was it? What is it? And that's the thing. That's kind of the beauty of the story. I don't know. I don't know what it was. The thing I'll say about it from my personal perspective is a few things. One, I don't think it was fake. I don't think it was a hoax. I don't think all these people were lying. They seem sincere. And again, I will get into a little bit more about that on the individual episodes, talking about the people we did interview. Each episode will be broken down by a specific interview. I don't think these people were lying. There's credible evidence in multiple areas, and there's parts of me that wants to believe a little bit of it all. When you start to look at the wildlife preserve and the toxic spill and the government's role there, I mean, those are three things right there that are quite tangible that just collide. And it's hard to go, well, how is that not, relative and related to what happened here? You go through the cornstalk curse and whether you believe in curses or not, or just bad juju and taboo things and karma. I don't fault anybody really for having any of their own beliefs. I think maybe when we set out to make this, you have this maybe optimistic ideal that by the time we're done, we're going to figure this out. But then really what you come to realize is, oh no, we've probably uncovered more questions than answers in doing this. If you think it's government, if you think it's Native American manifestation of a curse, if you think it's extraterrestrial, if you think it's a mutated animal, there's plenty of evidence to support and substantiate all of those theories. That's one of the beauties of the story. It's why I think still, remains alive. I mentioned earlier I've had an interest in the Zodiac case, and it's still unsolved. That's another case. It's still unsolved. Like how many things in present day are still a mystery? Not many, and this is one of them. And I think it's why it's just struck a chord with so many people. It's definitely become a little bit more mainstream now with the festival, which, congratulations to them. I have to say, the Walmsleys, a longtime Point Pleasant residents, have almost single-handedly changed the course of their town's direction when you think about it. I know probably, throughout their process, people have probably given them some pushback, with the whole, more traditional history versus this, paranormal history. But I know them as a family have made a collective effort to redirect where their town was going. And they've brought commerce to their town. They've changed the economy in their town, the traffic in their town. What one thing we didn't discuss with the Silver Bridge that people don't realize is Point Pleasant is at a point. It is literally a point, an angle where two rivers connect. And there used to be a bridge off of the main street in the town that brought you to Ohio. So there was a reason to go through Point Pleasant. It had a purpose. If you're coming over Ohio and you need something, you need a drink, you need something to eat, you stop in Point Pleasant. But after the bridge fell and they rebuilt the bridge, they built it several miles north of Point Pleasant. So Point Pleasant really became pointless, to where you didn't have a reason to go there. You didn't have a purpose to go there. It was kind of a no man's land, a ghost town. And so, the work that the local townspeople have done, people like Danny Bellamy and Jeff Wamsley, and I'm sure I'm forgetting others there, they helped create a draw to their town. You could have easily sat there and gone, oh, well, we're cursed and this and that, and there's no future here. Or they could have moved. Simply, they could have moved out of town. But I know there are people that love their community and they love their town, and they have turned a negative thing amazingly into something that is not celebrated, but just looked at in a different perspective. I think it's pretty cool what they've done as well.
I think what you were touching on before about people's is it real? Is it not real? All that kind of stuff. I think one of the things that gives it a lot of credibility is that when we first approached a lot of these people, they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want this to be known. When you have people who are trying to perpetuate a hoax, they are chomping at the bit to talk about it. They want to talk about it. It's their whole purpose.
Right.
And they try to spread it around, and they're trying to look for press, and they're looking for as much attention as they can. These people didn't want that. They really weren't seeking us. We sought them. And so to me, that whole approach lends credence to whatever they have to say, whatever comes out of their mouth. When you really don't want to ante up, and you finally do, then you got to know what they say is they believe.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely left there thinking, going in, I was like, oh, I don't know what to expect. I don't think that these people, I think that they're just like making the whole thing up. But when we left there, I definitely left thinking that these people believe that they saw something. Now, what they saw, I don't know because I wasn't there, but they believe that they saw it. And for you to say, oh, that's, it's bull, it didn't actually happen, I think that that's a very closed-minded thing to do, because they believe that they saw something. So they saw something. What is it that they saw? We don't know.
Yeah. You don't have a whole town of charlatans.
Right. Yeah. It's hard to get everybody on the same page to all lie about the same thing and be pretty accurate in their descriptions. And the other thing that I'll say too is no one ever asked us for money. No one got paid. No one got paid to be on camera for their story. And if not, and actually it was the opposite. We had to essentially beg, especially the Mothman related people, the eyewitnesses or people who knew someone. They had no interest in being on camera to talk about this. So, when you start to look at all those things, it just makes you go, there's something to this, and there's something more here. These people are not lying. I never felt that at all. And I think they were being sincere. I don't think they know what they saw. They weren't, no one was going, well, here's what I saw and this is what it was. Nobody could really come up with an explanation for it other than that we don't know. And, but it did happen. It's funny, this project, it was a long time ago, but it's really stayed with me. I have a painting in my house. It's an abstract painting that I saw in a store once. And when I saw it, I said, that reminds me of West Virginia. It's funny. It's even when I think about it, I go, that's West Virginia. But if you were to walk in my house and look at it, you'd be like, what is it? It's nothing. But to me, it's West Virginia. And it's a circle. And it's kind of like this gold-plated thing, and it just, to me, it's like an abstract. It reminds me of the mountains and the fog that comes off the mountains of West Virginia. It's something that's very specific to that area. That until you go out there, till you see it, you really don't know it's a thing. And so I look at that painting in my house all the time, and I always think back to the people and the friends that we made out there. And so, in closing up, I just I want to thank everybody that had helped make this project the possibility. Outside of us, there were a lot of other people in the post department, the effects department. I'm not going to name them because I know I'm going to forget people, and then I'm going to feel bad that I forgot about them. So just anyone, if your name is in the credits of the Eyes of the Mothman, thank you so much for allowing me to tell this story. I don't think any of us knew that it was going to, reach where it did in terms of almost like cult status. But I'm glad that it's been able to provide a respectful remembrance of the events that have happened there, in the 1960s and late 1960s. And I'm glad that there's a whole new generation of people that'll find it. And I hope that people enjoy this podcast. I hope they enjoy the interviews that we recorded. And who knows, maybe one day someone will even take the information we've put out there and use it as to find some type of closure, or to find some ending to the story, or to find some evidence or proof or conclusion of what the Mothman was and why it all happened.
Thanks to everybody who helped us. And, I hope they enjoyed the documentary.
Yeah, get yourself the DVD, and you could probably get one of those signed posters too
if you liked our film. We're happy to send you an autographed copy of the DVD. Just check out our website, and that's where you can find it. Thank you, and happy Mothman hunting.
Happy Mothman. Is there a Mothman Day?
I don't know, but there should be.
Well, the festival's in September, so let's say Happy Mothman Month.
Oh, okay. I like that.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Eyes of the Mothman, the podcast. For more information about our program, or to find out where you can watch the original documentary film or purchase a limited edition signed DVD copy, please visit www.eyesofthemothman.com.